Ask a question. Is there anybody here that has never been to one of our workshops? Okay. Out of those people, is there anybody that has not at least read one of the books or taken the Cathar course or something? That's not too bad. Okay. I asked this question because we don't do what we call closed groups. We don't discriminate against people that have X amount of knowledge compared to Y amount of knowledge. It makes more work for me because I have to come into a situation and try to literally harmonize the group consciousness field where the people that don't know any of the information, don't know the reference points that I would use, and the people that do know it and heard it over and over again could get bored if I don't do it right. So I asked the question first of all to get an idea of where I need to go and how carefully I need to backtrack to explain things, because I don't want to lose anyone. The information that we present, we, meaning those of Azurite Temple and those that I will talk about in a few minutes, we do our best to bring you information that is, some people say, it's out there, but it's also extremely practical. It's very usable. It's important to me as a speaker, as a person who cares about you and about you being able to use something I have to give, that I take the time to try to get whatever questions you might have. Now, the questions are fun because there's usually not a lot of time, especially with big groups, for question and answers, for individual question and answers. So I will try as I go along to create a sequence of information that will help you to at least get 50% of it. And the other 50 you'll still get, it just might not assimilate yet. It'll take you maybe 2 days or a week or a month. When we give workshops, they are for a purpose. They are for personal purposes of spiritual growth, for the advancement of consciousness, not just consciousness studies. You can study it all you want, but learning how to use it is what makes studying it worthwhile. So we will give you information that will assist you on a personal level. But we also do that within the greater context, because you don't exist as an island unto yourself that doesn't have any relationship to anything else in the universe. Every one of us are a part of a larger universal drama, a larger universal reality field. Because of that, we will give information in a way that first helps you to understand certain concepts in relation to yourself, and then how that applies and how those concepts apply to the greater picture of what's happening on this planet right now. This planet does not exist alone in space and time. It exists as part of a galaxy that's part of a universe that's part of even larger structures. So one of the things that our teachings are built upon is called the Law of One, which is an interpretation of science and spirit that acknowledges the interconnection between all life fields, from the personal level to the planetary, to the galactic, to the universal, to the cosmic, and to source. So you will have information that can be applied to every one of these levels of development. Most people, when they start spiritual development, begin where they are, which is, I am me. That's the place to begin. You can't begin someplace else because your consciousness is stationed right here with you in your body right now. When you start with I am me and start to learn about the parts of your consciousness that you have that you may have forgotten now that you're in a body, you begin a process of expansion of awareness. That expansion of awareness assists not only your mind to expand, but it changes your body as well, because your consciousness is anchored or rooted into this three-dimensional reality through your DNA. The chemical DNA and something behind the chemical DNA that's called the substrand DNA matrix. So your body is as spiritual as your mind and your spirit are. But in our society, we've lost touch with the ancient knowledge that taught us this. Once upon a time, everyone knew this as common knowledge. The science and the spirit went hand in hand. Right now, because of many events in history, some of you know those events because we've had workshops that dealt extensively with what's called the hidden and forbidden history of this planet and of our race and those kind of things. In the ancient of days, the ancient races had all of this information. They had an understanding of their history, how they got here, how the planet got here. In our history line, we have, many thousands of years ago, lost the information and the memory. There were things, conditions, that created that situation. There are conditions that will operate as permanent until we do something to change them. When we work with the techniques. I like to call them techniques because they're things you do with yourself and with your mind. They are called bioregenesis techniques. Bio refers to the biology and the biological template. Regenesis refers to recreating it, bringing it back to what it originally was. So our memory comes back, and so our consciousness, our spiritual consciousness, which is stationed in higher dimensional fields, begins to have the ability again to anchor itself into our bodies here. This is a process of awakening that is a journey like you would not believe. For those of you who haven't started the journey on a conscious level yet, realize that there are levels of your awareness that are already fully conscious of the fact that you're evolving. You will learn more and more as you grow to become a person who does conscious evolution, which means the part of you that's here also starts to understand the process you're involved with. Now, this workshop over this weekend is going to be a challenge for a couple of reasons. One is because it is a mixed group, where this is the highest level of information that's been provided so far. It is the master's course of the masters. So for the people who have been a part of this work for a while now and have come to numerous workshops, they're going to get a lot more out of it than the people who have no exposure to this work. But you can still get a lot out of it because the techniques that will be given and practiced in this workshop you can use even if you didn't know anything about them. Teaching you about them helps your mind to understand why you would want to do them, and it helps you develop an understanding where you can trust doing them, because it isn't wise to go out and just do techniques of energy that do stuff in your body that you don't know what it is. So we explain what it is. But this is going to be very challenging for me to try to get this level of information across to you. For one reason is because I was just informed about it. The level of information that I'm talking about is on what is called a security clearance. All right, in the interdimensional spectrum, which for the people who are new is part of the reality field we are dealing with. It's a multidimensional system, 15-dimensional time matrix. We're dealing with 15 dimensions, 15 levels of consciousness, and information and identity stationed at each of those levels. The information that this workshop is based on was on D14 security clearance. It was a security clearance that even people that on this planet that walk around and say they're ascended masters and those kind of things, they can't access this. It's a collective decision from a much higher place as to whether that type of knowledge will be added to a reality system or not. Because knowledge can be extremely helpful in healing and in growth, but if it's applied with a lack of ethics or a lack of understanding, it can also be a harmful thing. So there's been many thousands of years on this planet that certain levels of knowledge were not permitted because the consciousness of the beings that live here had de-evolved to the degree that they didn't remember why there were certain laws of how you use power when you have it. So that power and the memory of how to use it was taken away. It wasn't taken away by what we call guardian groups or angelic races. It was taken away by groups that we call fallen angelic races. Now, for the new people, it's interesting when I talk about things like this, to use my reference points, whether I will lose a person or not depends upon which side of a polarity issue the person is on. Right now, people that come to workshops like this have either some interest in spiritual development or they have some interest in things like UFOs and sightings and paranormal activity. All right. Now, people that work with this program start to realize they're all of the same thing. So if you're a person who's been interested in, say, the UFO movement and following that kind of thing, and you hear me talk about fallen angelics, I can just imagine that your astral body will roll its eyes and say, oh, here we go, another light, light, love, and fluffy-headed person. It's not that kind of information. So I wanted to point this out. So if I use terms ETs, UFOs, that they're not my favorite terms to use because they're misleading. But if I use terms like angels and angelics, that does not mean I am a person that's presenting anything you've ever heard before in very many thousands of years on what angels and angelics are, or fallen angelics. So the people that are new, I would ask you to suspend judgment on the terminology that's used for a while and try to get more interested in the concepts that are being moved around And later, if you're interested in exploring it, you'll find out why certain words are used to describe certain things. ETs and angelics can be considered the same thing, but ET is a misleading concept because it makes you think of other beings that are in physical systems that use mechanical spaceships to get here. And that completely does not touch upon the reality of beings who are not made out of a matter density level like we are, and the fact that they have the ability to do intertime travel and interspace travel without the use of vehicles. So we are talking about ET issues, we are talking about angelic issues, but more than anything, we're talking about spirituality and manifestation, and what it means to be in a manifest world. The information that we have had, now this information started to be given for public release in 1998, and it was ready for publication in May of 1999. That is when we did a simultaneous publication of 2 books called Voyagers, The Sleeping Abductees, which was Voyagers 1, and Voyagers 2, The Secrets of Amenti. The Secrets of Amenti book started to explain some of the lost history of this race. It started to explain about the realities of interdimensional mechanics, and it started to explain about something called the Halls of Amenti Stargates. The word Amenti is an ancient word that goes back to another place that's not on this planet. The Halls of Amenti are a series of stargates that exist in this planet, and they have for many millions of years. The stargates of this planet are a hidden reality. Our scientists, because they do not have interdimensional transparticle science available to them right now, do not realize that stargates exist. But many of them doing quantum mechanics theorize that is definitely possible, but they don't have the framework to justify in mathematical formula how exactly something like that might occur. And therefore, if science investigates the concept of stargates, they are doing so blind. They are doing so without an understanding of the templates, which are the blueprints for such things, how they might work. Fortunately, there are beings in this huge, massive universe of ours that never lost touch with the information. There is a way that things work. There is a format, and there is a structure and a blueprint for how reality systems are built, for how stargates work in planetary systems, for how consciousness and the beings on a planet have a relationship to the stargates. For many thousands of years, the information on the Halls of Amenti stargates was common knowledge among human races, ancient human races, the memory of who has been intentionally buried. The relics or evidence, physical evidence, has been taken on purpose by other beings that have visited here. We have much to learn about ourselves, and that learning can begin if we start to learn a little bit about our planet. Because when it comes down to it, anybody that's taken the Kathara Biospiritual Healing System Level 1 course and the when it was on the Kauai workshop, will understand what I mean when I say the body and the planet are built in the same way. They have a different outside form, but their core template is structured exactly the same way. The galactic template is structured the exact same way. The template I'm talking about it can be called several different things. It can be called the divine blueprint. It is called the Kathara grid, which means the light, sound, one grid or unity grid of light waves and sound waves or scalar waves that form a blueprint, a tangible blueprint of energy upon which particles and antiparticles accrete or pull in to fill out a form, a waveform, into three-dimensional flesh or three-dimensional matter if you're a planet. The information that we've received the beginning of today, and it was information that they told me the beings that I work with are called the Guardian Alliance. That's just kind of like an easy nickname. There'll be information distributed or available tomorrow that's the introduction for that large manual you see up there, this one. In this, there's a lot of explanation already as far as who I am, who the Guardian Alliance is, what we're involved with, all of that. People that aren't planning to purchase this, I do suggest it just because there's a huge amount of information in here that just, I can't even qualify it compared to anything else. It's personal, but it's also massive. But in this particular manual, the first section is dedicated to explaining a bit about what the Azurite Temple is, why it was created. There's information on something called the Cloister Doratura plates, which are holographic discs that hold ancient history records. And every few generations or so, there are 3 people chosen because they incarnate to serve that role, and they come in conscious sometimes. They come in conscious as speakers. They are approached in early childhood, usually. I was. And they are taken to places that on this planet they tell you don't exist, but they do. Physically taken. They are showed a procedure of translating data from these history records. The history records hold the science records as well, and the race records as far as where we came from. They hold the ancient spiritual teachings of something called the Founders' Races, which were the first races that came into manifest form in this 15-dimensional time matrix. The information that we bring to you, piece by piece, wave by wave, is drawn from the Cloister Doratura plates. It is not channeled information. In fact, we don't endorse channeling unless you know exactly what you're doing with your 15-dimensional anatomy, because you can hurt yourself. There are things in the interdimensional spectrum that if you don't know how to use your energy fields in a proper way, can cause harm to your energy fields. So the new people that are here, I don't want you to make any mistake that this is channeled information. It's not that I can't channel, but when you get to a certain level of understanding the mechanics of things, you realize you don't have to be a channel. There are higher levels of interdimensional communication available to you. Channeling, as it's done in the New Age movement, is a situation where beings from a different density level, a different level of matter, this is the most dense level of matter. Well, in channeling, beings from a less dense level of matter literally push their energy into your bioenergetic fields and into your DNA template. They move their consciousness into your body, and very often they take over, which is called going into trance. The danger in that practice is that, A, channels don't even know who they're dealing with. A lot of channels will say, oh, I channeled this angel, I channeled that angel. My first question is, how do you know it's an angel from a fallen angel? Do you know the difference? So when I talk about the information, when I bring this information to you, there is a level of what the guardian races of this time matrix consider integrity, because it is not brought through in a way that allows it to be compromised. The information in this weekend's workshop was on 14th dimensional security clearance, which means, first of all, I don't get it until right before I transmit it to you, which is enough to drive me crazy, but I don't have the luxury of that reaction, so I don't go there. That means that a program of the most intensive data that I have seen given yet is still in me in energy form and running through me, there for translation, but it's not on paper yet. The closest we have is the itinerary type thing you'll be getting at the 9 o'clock break. The reason we don't have it now is because right before I came, that's what I pulled off the computer to make the master. The information in here, I will read to you some of the things that are in this course. And it's like, this is ancient history that I do have the memory of, but to bring this level of detail into this space-time frame is not an easy thing to do. So I will do my best to relearn it and remember it well enough that I can give it to you in a way that you can appreciate and enjoy it, so you can remember it. Because in truth, the information, even some of the most highest level information, doesn't belong to me. It doesn't just belong to the guardian races. It belongs to every being that's manifest in this time matrix. We're just translators who keep it alive in different reality systems. Now, the first subject that we'll be talking about, the thing is called Mechanics of Manifestation and Embodying Your Heroic Future. That was the title that they gave me a couple of weeks ago when we were just putting the things out on the internet to let people know that we were giving a workshop. It always goes this way with the higher level data. I'll get the title, they'll give me the title, and right before I will get the information that becomes a transmission of frequency that I have spent 20 years learning to translate through my biosystems. So I can stretch it out into words and slow it down so it can translate into my home language. Now, they added this as the big title. So you can consider the original title a subtitle. The big title is Mind, Matter, Merkaba, and Mastery. Now, we're going to get into something called manifestation templates, or the blueprints for manifestation. The people who have been with this work for a while, that's not a new concept. I'm going to have fun trying to help the people who have not been a part of the workshops coming to get to a point where you can understand that easily. There is also a track record of work behind us that's been given since 99. All of the work, literally, that's in writing has been done since 99. And I tell you, I could use clones to bring it down. But if there are holes in what I'm talking about to the people who are not familiar with this, it is worth getting some of the product. I'd give it to you free if I could. But at this point, so many hours a day are required that I have to make a choice. I'm either here to be a spiritual being and bring the knowledge that I incarnated to bring, or I have to go get a 9-to-5 job and try to figure out how to do the same thing, which I can't do. So the product is available. If there are things that don't make sense to you, I do apologize in advance. It just simply means that there is a whole bunch of information of a different frequency, because information is energy equals frequency, just like radio waves are frequency. There are certain channels and stations of frequency of our consciousness. The earlier information was a bit lower frequency, and progressively we've been raising in frequency in the information. So if you come in at this level of frequency, but you haven't assembled into your consciousness yet the frequencies and the information they carry that would be between here and where your body is down here, there will be gaps in your understanding. That's normal, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not aware enough to deal with this kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong either. It simply means there's a frequency bridge that needs to be made, and there are products in the form of audios and videos from workshops. We've tried to tape everything we do because we never do the same thing twice, and it just builds every time. So there is the stepping down a frequency. If we're up here and you need to fill in blanks here, you can find a lot about dimensional structure and the templates I talk about in the Kathara Bao Spiritual Healing System. It teaches you the context of healing, which is the 15-dimensional structure. It tells you what dimensions are, it explains what they are, it explains their structure, it explains the basic things you need to understand if you're going to do master's template mechanics, which is what being a master is. It's really interesting. In the New Age movement, there's a lot of people that walk around claiming to be ascended masters. And I ask them certain questions, and they haven't a clue. And that shows me something. If they were ascended masters, as they claim to be, they would have open in their bodies the level of consciousness that could answer those particular questions that have to do with simple creation mechanics. I don't like to claim anything except I am who I am. There's information in, this is some of the stuff I'll put out for tomorrow, for the people who don't know me and who don't have this information, because you other guys that have other manuals and things have the introductory information. There's information on my biography that'll give you some idea of who I am and how I came to be doing what I'm doing. But I just want you to understand that we can help each other here by realizing there's levels of consciousness that are all sorts of different frequencies in the room right now. For everybody to understand what was given to me to bring to you so we could all understand, we need to go into what's called an average mean of consciousness, or a frequency band that can hold all of the consciousness in the room, that it's low enough where the people who don't have any of this information can catch it, and where it's high enough where they can come up, but the people that are up here that already have lots of information aren't going to drift off and fall asleep and be bored to death. Because boredom comes from frequency oversaturation. You start to get feeling bored when you've gone through a frequency pattern over and over and over, and you don't need that frequency coming in anymore. So it kind of puts you to sleep and your mind drifts off and you get like attention deficit disorder temporarily and that kind of thing. So I will try to You see, what I usually do is I'll go right into the hard stuff. Like say, well, this is that. Yeah, this is, the intense stuff. This is the new stuff. Because I get excited when each level of new stuff is given. I kind of pound away at my computer going, oh, look at this. And, Michael will walk by and he's like, look. And I'll read a part of it and say, oh, that's neat. And I know it connects to this, but I don't know how yet, So this is how the information goes. But if I start with that level with you, I'm going to lose most of you. So I'll simply start with how it was given to me as far as the sequence. Now, with these programs, I don't do the sequencing of information. I don't decide what I'm going to teach first and what I'm going to teach after that. This comes through directly from the plate translations. This is how the information is sequenced in frequency on those holographic disc Cloister Duratura plates. There's a reason for that. The lower frequency comes first and it leads up to the higher. It creates the bridge of frequency that allows understanding to happen with as little gaps as possible. So the order that this information is given in is provided for me from the plates. And I try to stick to it, but sometimes I'll get a little urge from interdimensional communication, not channeling. All right? I'll get a little urge to add a little frequency here or add a little there, because that helps to compensate for if there's anybody in the group that's kind of going over here with their frequency because they lost that trail of frequency. We try to bring them back around so the understanding can still take place. Now, I used to be very self-conscious about one thing when I was doing public presentation. First of all, I hated public presentation. I was always very shy and liked to be invisible, and this job doesn't allow me to do that. But one of the things that was most difficult for me was standing up in front of a group of people and trying to explain a level of frequency to them that they have not ever encountered. Trying to explain my experience in the way I understand it that involves interdimensional communication that is not channeling. Telepathic communication is different than channeling. So you will see, because I just let myself be who I am these days, and I don't kind of get embarrassed when new information comes in while I'm standing here talking to you. But there will be some times when the people that I work with, that I'll explain a little bit about, but I don't want to bore the people who already know that, so that information isn't writing, they will literally send thought forms to me that come out as telepathic communication, where I can hear them. That, in that way, it will allow me to be more responsive to the group, in the best way that I can. So at times, you may see me do little things like, okay. And once in a while, you'll find I'll be on a roll and saying something, and then all of a sudden it'd be like getting tapped on the head. Wait a minute. Shift frequency, okay? It would be better at this frequency. And then literally, my thought train will go in a different line, but I'll say, they did it again. So if you see these things happen with me, I'm not a nut, I'm not a flake, and I'm not a channel, but I am responsive to the moment, because that allows me to be the best transmitter of information that I can be. As a speaker, as a teacher, that's what it's my job to do, just transmit information to you in the best way I know how. Now, when we get into our itinerary for this presentation, we will begin tomorrow with the heavy stuff, which means I'm going to be up all night trying to put as much of it on paper as I can get, because right now, when it's on security clearance and it's given to me on the spot where I don't have any paperwork myself walking into it, I will do my best to stay up all night, and I've done this before. I've done numerous workshops, literally no sleep, because I know how important the paperwork can be in helping you to remember. You might get it once you're here in this frequency, but once you leave and go back to a different frequency that you're more used to, you start losing pieces of it, because the group helps to sustain the awareness in each individual. So I will do my best to put as much of this information into what I call a chart pack, which are small packages usually filled with diagrams, and those diagrams take hours. I will have something for you on paper. I'm not sure exactly how much of it. If nothing else, at least the techniques will be written down on paper, because there are several techniques that are going to be given. Some of them will be given Sunday, some will be given tomorrow. That they ran them through me really fast once as I was sitting at the computer trying to proof this to get it out of the printer for the master. I wouldn't even remember it. If it's here, do this, do this, do this, and then you like walk out the door, what did I just do? You will have the technique. The techniques, there are several on paper, but I will also try to give you other pertinent information. Now, if you really want to understand the context that this takes place within, and if you want to be able to have a whole bunch of other techniques that will facilitate your use of the master's level techniques that are being given now, the new manual, what do I do with it here? The new manual is, this thing contains some amazing things. It's called the Emerald Covenant Masters Templar Stewardship Initiative. All right, it's the Secrets of the Amenti Stargates and the Grail Quest Signet Roundtables. This tells you about your body structure, about your subtle body structure, about dimensional structure, and it also tells you about all the forbidden hidden history, and it tells you about grid mechanics and something called the Rainbow Roundtables, which is a program of science and spirit united that the ancients practiced when they were guardians of the planetary energy systems and the stargates. We're being given this information because we are being prepared. Our race is being prepared to resume what was once our position. We were the guardians and the security team for the Halls of Amenti Stargates. The Halls of Amenti Stargates have not been opened in over 200,000 years. They only opened during a period of time called a stellar activations cycle. We have started, as of January 2000, a stellar activation cycle. The Halls of Amenti Stargates are opening. Now, this book would not have been given until about 2008 if things were going according to original plans in the higher dimensions. The book is being given now, and the crash course and information is being given now, because there are certain events that were listed in the book, Voyagers Volume 2, Secrets of Amenti. It was called the Amenti Ascension Schedule, which was talking about when particular things would happen in relation to the opening of the Halls of Amenti Stargates. They were not intended to open till 2012, and then in 2017, there was supposed to be an event called a 3-day particle conversion period. This planet has not had one of those in over 200,000 years. They can be smooth or they can be messy. It depends on how the planetary energy systems are working. There are certain events that have been taking place in the political arena since what we call the Atlantean period of 50,000 BC and forward to this time that are still ongoing events that were scheduled to come to a head during the stellar activation cycle that was scheduled for the year 2000 to 2017. Because of the events that involve an occurrence in history that's known as the Atlantean Conspiracy that is still ongoing, that was projected into the future here to reach its fulfillment here. Because of this, now this history is in that book, okay, in the large manual. There are things taking place here that the events that were supposed to take place between 2012 and 2017, and this is new stuff for the guys who have been through this before too, this is just in, has been accelerated. Somewhere between 2003 and 2006, the Halls of Amenti are opening, which was news to me. I was waiting for 2012, and see, what will happen is there are a group of people on the planet called indigo children. Indigo children are called indigo because they have the 6th strand template of their DNA activated kind of like on idle, waiting to bring that consciousness and that energy in. They're born with that. They came here as a large soul group that were incarnations of the founders' races. And they go to sleep when they come into incarnation, just like anybody else does. Most of the people that come to these workshops, some of them are completely all, were indigo children, because it's put out on a minimum of D6 frequency transmission, which hits the 6th strand, which gives you, maybe I'll go check that out feeling. All right. The indigo children were supposed to go through a stage of awakening every couple of years. Certain amounts of their consciousness would get back, get into body, and they'd know a little more about what they were here for and what they're here to do and what their life purpose was. And they were supposed to have it kind of like a nice stretch and growing and waking up between the years 2000 and 2012. Well, because what's happening in 2012 is now due at the latest 2006, most likely and more likely in 2003. is the rush job wake-up call. It's like the difference between the sun coming gently in your window in the morning and touching you as you lay there sleeping in bed, and you feel the warmth, and you kind of open your eyes and stretch, rub your eyes a little, nice stretch out of bed, you know. That would have been the 2012 awakening procedure. This is more like somebody comes into your room and flips the mattress over. Get up! Get up. The reason, now even for me, this is like, it's like trying to jog to keep up with yourself. This information is moving so fast. Now, for me to bring information through, my DNA template has to activate fast enough to keep up with the frequencies of the information. My body has been going through, like, I'm surprised I still look like a human. I'm just morphing all over the place inside. I've had, as soon as this transmission started to be given, just little pieces of it, little indications that it was something on security clearance that I wouldn't get until, the day of, my back went out for 3 days from Kundalini activation. I mean, just literally I was walking around like this. As soon as that cleared and those energies synthesized, then my sinuses started going crazy. And I've been sneezing ever since. So my body had to clear a bunch of stuff out really fast to make room for this frequency so I could even bring the information through. Now, the information, it's actually very good news. It's manifestation templates. We're going to do basics. Now, here's where the people who haven't had any of the information will have a chance to catch up. We'll deal with template substance, which gets into primal substance, Partakai units, chains, grids, chelons, codes, scalar waves, fire letters, micro subatomic units, and anti-units. All right, that far, most people who've come to other things already know about those. So I'll warn you ahead of time, that will go fast. All right? And what I mean fast, there are times when I get on a flow of information and we're on such short time. I mean, this stuff you could take 3 months to teach, little bit by little bit. You literally get bombarded with frequency and information and just hold as much as you can. But we will go that far, and it will help to bring the people up that haven't been, exposed to the work. It'll help to get you at least to understand some terms of reference that will be used in the rest of it. And if you want more detail on those, they are in the other books. There are some of them in the Templar book, and there are some in the Kathara healing book. Now, we will go from there into something called Mayans, Dions, and Trions. New words! This is information that's not in the Kathara Level 1. It was due for, I think, Kathara Level 4. We're only on Kathara Introduction to Level 2 of Kathara Healing. So these are some interesting new things that if we're going to learn about manifestation templates, and we're ultimately going to learn about what the heck are thoughts and what are we doing with them or what are they doing to us and how do we get control of our manifestation here to fulfill the original purpose that we came here to fulfill. How do we become our heroic selves, the best selves that we can be? And the best self you can be will be the most joyful. You will have the most expansive, full experience that you chose for yourself before you came into incarnation. So it's very personal, but it also has to do with how do individuals use their inherent power to be able to assist this planet through the opening of the halls of Amenti stargates so this planet keeps its energetic integrity. And how do the indigo children fill the big secret that their mission was about that has only been recently revealed? The big secret was the indigo children incarnated here because it was known that stellar activation would happen, and every time a stellar activation cycle happens, it ends in a 3-day particle conversion period, which is very intense information. Some of it's contained in Voyager's Volume 2, Secrets of Amenti. However, it is a period of time that people or beings that cannot go into a state that is known as Merkaba will leave the planet rapidly because their atomic structure will not be able to handle the frequencies that are coming in through the opening of the stargates. Indigos came here to provide what is called a host matrix field for the people on this planet who do not have that level of DNA strand activation, so their particles can't hold those frequencies. The indigos on the planet, when they wake up, create an energy field that helps to hold what's called a planetary Merkaba stable. They also help with, during that 3-day particle conversion period, If things go well and something doesn't happen, that's usually catastrophic if it does, but we're not looking at that one, they assist in what are called temporary evacuations. It's been a long time since an evacuation took place on this planet. The evacuations have taken place repeatedly during every stellar activation cycle, only for 3 days. Where do you go when you get evacuated? Mars? No, you don't go to Mars. You go to inner Earth, which the people who know this work understand a little bit about what inner Earth is. They also understand what parallel Earth is. This all gets down to the physics of particles, antiparticles, and antiparticles, and different angular rotation of particle spin, or the spin rate and the angle the particles that our atoms are made out of spin at. When we use Merkaba, which we'll talk about and learn more about over this weekend, we have the ability to control the activation of our DNA template, and we have the ability to alter and affect the angular rotation of particle spin, which means the electrons and protons inside of our atoms can shift in their electrical polarity from negative to positive or positive to negative polarity, which will allow the atoms to behave differently. It will allow them tolerance to what would be considered high levels of radiation coming from the stargates. You will only get burnt by radiation if you have a certain angular rotation of particle spin compared to the angle of particle spin in those waveforms. The indigos are the team that will assist other races who've been involved here for thousands of years. Once in a while they come and let themselves be known. They're to help get people in, if necessary. If they cannot, as a collective of indigos, hold enough frequency to keep a planetary Merkaba host matrix stable, then there will be evacuations to inner Earth that will take place through the halls of Amenti and the related portal systems. This is a lot of information, and you're getting hit with really high-level stuff for the people who've just come in. And it could seem like, wow, I just entered a science fiction novel. I feel like that sometimes, and I've seen a lot. I've been taken to the halls of Amenti, I've been to inner Earth, and I've been to what's called Terra in Density 2. I've been there physically. I didn't do it on my own. I had a lot of help. I was shown those things and taken to those places. So I would have, to my credit as a speaker, not just, well, somebody told me about this, and they said it's real. I know these things are real. I know that if things go well, people can be taken through. I have had other lifetimes where I worked with a team of indigos, and we assisted groups of people to go into inner Earth so they could go into the halls of Amenti stargates, so they could do what is called ascend, which means shift out of gross matter density by integrating their spiritual consciousness from the higher dimensional fields, transmuting the body to the next dense state of matter, the less dense state. That's how you progressively work yourself out of manifestation and get mastery over the manifest experience. Then you can come and go as you want to once you have mastery over it. So we're on a very interesting mission. It could be overwhelming. I could be overwhelmed with it. I could choose that. It wouldn't do me any good if I did, and it certainly wouldn't do you any good if I did. So I want to point out that when you're exposed to information that your mental body or your linear thought patterns here, because where they hold your beliefs and your ideas and those kind of things that you got used to having because people told you that's how it was here, so you accepted it. There are things that may just make your mental body scream and go, what? That can't be real. And if the mental body doesn't, the little bit lower frequency emotional body might do it for you. Okay, my mind can deal with this. I can see the concepts. I can read all this. Yes, it explains it very intensely. Yes, it makes more sense than the scientists and the priests. Okay, makes sense. And the emotional body goes, I don't want to be here. I'm scared. Then the other part of the emotional body, it's a little bit higher frequency than that part, goes, oh, I remember something. There's a part of me that remembers this. We get to go home, So there are reactions that happen to this information that it will be different for everyone. You might have and you might not have any reaction at first. Just, that's interesting. It may take you 6 months to integrate it. But at the rate we're going and the rate the frequencies are coming into the planet right now, the more frequency that comes into this planet, it will hit what's called your DNA substrand template. It triggers into activation your substrand template, which triggers into activation manufacture of different and new chemical compounds in the DNA chains. It brings more of you to life, whether you want to or not. So I have faith in the people of this planet and in the process, because this is a divine process. We'll awaken, and we can either help ourselves in the process by saying, okay, I'll roll with it. If you get hit a space where I'm clueless, can't deal with it yet, just know there is a place, a part of you, stationed in time ahead of you, which is in frequency ahead of you, that already gets it. So if you realize that now, you help to bring that part of you into integration with this part of you, so you help yourself to understand. It's part of achieving mastery. Now, the reason that the guardians get into explaining to you and to me things that personally, I was an artist, before I was activated to do this. I liked to paint pictures. I did not want to grow up to be a physicist. But at this point, I can have pretty intense debates with some physicists. The information is divine physics that is provided so we can understand not just the conceptual spiritual translation of God and angels and our higher identities and integrating ourselves and all that lovely stuff that's much easier to digest. There's also a scientific translation of what energy and consciousness units are doing to achieve those spiritually desired outcomes. So we're taught some basic physics of things that the physicists here haven't even found yet. When we get into myons, dions, and trions, we're going to get into the things that begin the process of formation of subatomic particles of positively charged, negatively charged, and zero charge or neutral subatomic particles. They group together in different ways to form what our scientists call matter, atoms. We're not going to go too heavy into it, just enough so we can understand a basic process where there is a process of going from what is called primal substance. Now, the people who have followed the work a bit know when I talk about primal substance, I'm talking about the first building blocks of anything manifest, which are units of consciousness called particae, particae, and particum. They form certain structures that then progressively fill out to form matter. Well, if you have matter over here and particae, particae, and particum here, myons, dions, and trions fit here, and then you will get your subatomic particles here. So it's a progression of the transduction sequence, how consciousness or thought gets transduced into externalization and into holographic projection of seeing a three-dimensional space-time system. One of the things we are going to get into here is exploring intensely, unfortunately, the idea that reality is a hologram. We're going to explore more of the dynamics by which that hologram is created, because it's created right through your body and right through your DNA template. We're going to, after we get through myons, dions, and trions, and subatomic matter, particles, antiparticles, protons, electrons, neutrons, the chemical clothing of matter, once we get past how thought becomes waveform, becomes chemical clothing, becomes atoms and molecules and matter forms, we're going to go into template structure, which gets into a real quick recap on primal order, dimensions, and primal fields, the primal sound fields that have to do with myons, the primal light fields that have to do with dions, and the primal consciousness, which has to do with trions, which are those neutral charged particles, or not quite particles yet, which has to do with source and what is called the still point. We are going to begin to understand where vibration and oscillation are two different things, and where the still point exists between them. And the still point is the point of power. It is also the point of your present moment focus of attention, but not this part of you, the part of you that's there when you close your eyes, that internal consciousness, that if your vision was shut off and you didn't see the hologram here, there is a stream of consciousness that is you, that's using this energy pattern that through the dynamics of creation appears as if it's objectified or external, that has to do with the relationship between myons, dions, and trions. But there is the stream of consciousness that is your consciousness, your eternal self. And it's from the still point where that consciousness intersects with the energy patterns that form the body and project the hologram that you have the power to change the template that your hologram is manifesting on. We're going to learn a bit more. We've explored some of these as we're working with DNA activations and regenesis. We are changing the templates back to their original divine blueprint, which is the pre-matter, 12th dimensional blueprint that holds our original intention and the original form of our template. But we're going to go beyond just doing the DNA activation thing. We're going to start to understand that we can use our understanding of the DNA template and the new understanding of what the heck is thought, anyway, once we start to understand what the heck thought is and how it interrelates with the DNA template, we will begin to be able to speak the language of the DNA template in a way that we can do something called thought seeding or DNA embedding, which means we can very specifically place specifically organized thought forms that we would like to see manifest. And believe me, I'll tell you to start. I want to win the lottery is one of the hardest ones to make manifest. Just so you know. You know? Now, the next hardest one is I want to make money. That's hard too. There's a trick that's in there that has to do with using words and concepts in a certain way that you're actually telling yourself, I have not this. So you are therefore manifesting the condition that you have not this. You know? And you can want money for the rest of your existence, but as long as you have not this, you will have not that. You know? So we are going to begin to explore the things that we have a little bit touched on before, and with the groups that have been working with this a lot: template substance, template structure, the creation currents, the Kirashe, Kundare, Antankarana, Kundalini, Turk, Daretic, and Telluric currents, that people who know Kathara healing are aware of what they are. And if you want to explore what they are more than what I will cover, because I will cover those relatively quickly, because this information is in the other manuals, and because the new information is so vital, it's important to keep the information rolling. So if you get lost, just remember, just kind of picture the other stuff we have available. It's like little donut lifesavers out in an ocean. You can swim to one of those and hang on for a while, and it'll absorb that, and it'll carry you to the next place. Once we get through creation currents, and this is going to be I'm telling you, I know this is going to go really quick. So if you want to, if any of the new people are planning to buy any of the product, it's a good time to buy it. Like I would even suggest, like tonight before you go into this, and read a little bit about the structure. If you're going to do by Kathara, read about the structure of dimensions and that kind of stuff. It will give you what are called aparthi. Aparthi are frequencies in your DNA template and your body template that correspond to certain levels of planetary, galactic, universal, and cosmic information. They're just frequency receivers that will allow some of the things that we're going to talk about to plug in more easily. I'm not saying you have to purchase those. There's never an obligation to do that. In fact, whenever I can, I try to give them out free. But the two manuals together are over 500 pages, and it costs a lot to print them. So we will go into, past the creation currents, into density levels, which we've talked about before, and the information's in those books. We know the states of matter, the people who have followed this course, and you will, if you read some of those books, you will have the states of matter. But what we don't know are words called thermoplasm, hydroplasm, siloplasm, celoplasm, and plasm. What are these things? They have to do with the density levels of matter. There are 5 density levels of matter. You have antimatter on density 5, you have prematter on density 4, you have etheric matter on density 3, you have semi-etheric matter on density 2, and you have physical gross matter density in density 1. A density is a 3-dimensional system. We have 5 3-dimensional systems, and that gives us 5 density levels. That is a time matrix. That's the structure and the context that we're having our existence and our experience of the hologram within right now. So we will deal with the density levels, a quick recap, and this is where the charts come in handy. There are charts in all of those to kind of show you visually The information is a lot easier to understand. We'll go from there into a little bit of discussing what is this matter stuff? What is semi-etheric matter? What might it look like? What might it act like? We're understanding these basic things about manifestation templates because when we go into the second section, we're going to learn a little bit about how these manifestation templates create the hologram of space-time, and we're going to go from there into understanding what thought has to do with these, because we're going to learn that thought is the manifestation template that's composed of all these things and structured of these things. The structures that we talk about beforehand are the structures of thought. Thought fields are made of myons, dyons, and tryons, particae, particae, particum, and they become fields of protons, electrons, positrons, neutrons, subatomic particle fields. They interact in specific ways. There is a format to how these particles interact. And this is why a lot of people can get the fact, okay, I'm in a hologram, because the New Age has been teaching this for a while. I'm in a hologram. Okay, I just have to think my thought really hard, energize it, will it, intend it, and remember that I'm part of the one, so I am God. I am God, and I intend it, therefore it is. I didn't really want it anyway. This happens. I mean, there are partial truths in those things. But anybody that's ever tried that, I say, okay, well, what's your batting average, right? Out of 100 things you tried to make happen, how many happened at all? And how many happened the way you put out for them to happen? When you get to that second one, it's really bizarre, because other levels of your own consciousness reorganize them so they come out different, but usually better than what you had intended in the first place. But there are reasons why, when we try thought manifestation from the 3D mind alone, it's hit or miss. If you happen to create an alignment with your higher levels of self, and you happen to create an alignment between your particles and their angular rotation of particle spin, then you will create a thought field that does indeed jump out from you and in about 3 days' time start to become manifest. It's usually hit or miss. It feels like, well, I'm the creator, I'm the manifester, they keep telling me this. And then the other part of you goes, why the heck can't I manifest anything? Why can't I do this? Why can't I master my body? If we're manifestors, we should all be able to walk around in the most beautiful body we ever decided we wanted. We should be able to even switch gender, I would think, if it's just a thought form and we can shift it and fix it. Yeah, right? You cut your toe and you're lucky if you're, using those types of thought manifestation things, if you can stop it from bleeding. There's a lot of things about thought manifestation that require a knowledge of divine physics. Not a heavy knowledge, just enough knowledge to understand what to do with the energy that is your consciousness when it's focused in a body. So we're going to get into some of those things. But before we do, we're going to talk about consciousness, the manifestation templates, and the hologram of space-time. We're going to talk about creation motive, which is the one consciousness. We're going to talk about the idea that's more than an idea. It's a manifest reality idea. But it's hard to see from here that we are all one being and one consciousness, and everything in the universe and all universes is part and exists within one conscious identity that is sentient, intelligent, has feeling, has desire, has intention, has will, and has the ability to manifest thought. Because we are each an aspect or a face of that collective identity that many people choose to call God, some choose to call Source, some choose to call the Unicide, and there's many other words for it. But that Source, that oneness, that one self, that is creation. Because we are units of the face of that Source, we are imbued with the potentialities and the characteristics of that Source, which means, as Source, as God manifests, we, as smaller aspects of God taking place within God, also have the ability to manifest. If we know what we're doing. It's like we're pieces of God that forgot who we were. And with the forgetting, we forgot how to do it. It's like we fell off the bike, hit our heads, had amnesia for a while, and couldn't remember how the heck to make a bike work again. We're relearning what it means to be part of that one consciousness and to be able to create from that space of I am Source, I am at one with Source. That doesn't mean you're God and you get to boss other people around, because they're God too. That doesn't mean just because you're human you're God, and you can go step on other animals and kill ants and cut down trees without asking permission, because they're God too. Atoms and molecules are made out of the units of the consciousness of God. So there's a whole etiquette that comes with understanding the oneness. If we can understand the oneness of creation, we can begin to understand the core creation motive. How did creation come to be in the first place? Where did it come to be? Where is it, really, in relation to what else? We can learn those basic things about Source, and what we're learning are those things about us, because we are part of Source, and we can look at ourselves as the many masks that Source wears when it chooses to come into manifest hologram in order to experience itself in individuation. There's a part of each of us that is always an indelible life and my conditions. That's a big excitement. The emotional body wants to stand up and cheer because it's been centuries since anybody's told us this, reminded us. So then you start to play with the manifestation principles, and you get really downtrodden after a while because you try, and you really believe and you gave your whole self to it, and usually to whatever group or guru or whatever told you could do this. Especially if you surrender your power, that's where you will not manifest with your desire. But then you get frustrated because you know that you wanted this to happen, but you got that instead. Or maybe nothing happened at all. Or maybe something absolutely horrible happened. There's a place of our own awareness that's in the higher dimensional fields. There is a still point in our consciousness that is the point that is always connected to Source, that knows the best way to organize a desire into an intention, into a pattern that can manifest in a way that brings the experience that we desired when we tried to set a thought form. We're going to learn the beginning of creating thought forms here. Thought forms as tangible structures. We have another program that was one of the first to be given. It was called Tangible Structure of the Soul. I think that's over there. If not, we do have it. It's an audio program that, excuse me, here's my nose again. It's an audio program that showed us the basic dimensional structure and began to show us where the different levels of our identity were, where our soul is, where our oversoul is, where our avatar level of consciousness is, our Christos self, where our Rishi level of self is, higher than that and more expanded than that, and where our own ascended master level of self is, and where our point of connection is to Source. So tangible structure taught us that. We learned the basic tangibility of the parts of ourselves that we can't right now see. What we're going to start doing in this workshop is learning about the tangibility of thought. And when we start to realize that every time we think a thought, we have created a form in crystalline structure. It's going to do something. Just like we were forms created first in templates or crystalline scalar wave structure by thought forms sent out by Source from that point of oneness. Every aspect of Source sends out thought forms in the way characteristic to its form. Every time a thought moves through us, or we think we thought a thought, we have set or added to an existing manifestation template. Part of learning mastery is learning mental body control, mind control. If you don't learn how to control your mind, somebody else will be glad to do it for you. Learning to control the mind is not a rigid thing. It's not a forced thing. It's a thing that must be done out of love. It's a thing that must be done in a way where you start off with absolute love for yourself, absolute forgiveness for yourself ahead of time. Absolute, I will not judge myself. This is how you begin the process of learning genuine mastery of your mind patterns. Once you can master some of your mind patterns, it's time to go into the pits of hell, which happen to live in strand template 2 and in your emotional body, because there are distortions that the planetary grids have that are stored in your strand 2 because you're on this planet, so you pick up the distortions in the energy patterns that create things in the emotion that the scientists and the doctors right now call the subconscious mind. There are all sorts of chaotic patterns there that can be reassimilated to where they can heal. But when they start to come up, they can create emotions that are not pleasant. You need to develop mental body mastery in order to say, well, if I feel that coming up, okay, first of all, I'm not going to react to it, it's just energy. I will acknowledge it and let it move through me. If you repress emotion because it doesn't feel good and you use your mind as a dictator instead of as a liberator, you will simply tie yourself in knots. You won't help your manifestation process, you won't do spiritual integration, you won't set yourself free. You'll actually just make the condition worse. It is a huge process that we're involved in on a personal level, just waking up and getting our DNA templates activated and getting to start to understand what is this thing we do when we think? What are thoughts? Where do they come from? Where do they go? If they really create things, how can I get better at this? You know, that kind of thing. These are the things we're going to explore. But there are so many things, so many levels, so many courses that really need to be given in between each level of this. I look at this and I say, oh my God, it is going to happen in 2003, isn't it? Because you would have given 5 years of increment material to get me to this point. This is the crash course in thought manifestation. It will end with a couple of techniques that are quite amazing. They're called Rishik level DNA embedding. How to literally create thought forms or desired experiences that you would like to see, feel, have happen in your hologram. Know where exactly to put them into the DNA by a simple process. Know how to energize them. First you initiate them. You put them in, put the thought pattern in that you want there. You need to put it in the right place. There are certain symbol codes that you can use to do this. There are certain symbols that are mathematical programs that correspond directly to certain instructions in your DNA templates and your manifestation template. We will be using symbol codes, which are light, sound, mathematical, geometrical programs. And not too many. There's not 1 million symbols to memorize or anything like that. There's a couple key master symbols. And a lot of them we've seen over and over, but nobody's been telling us what they do and what they are. There's 2 symbols we're going to be using. One of them is, well, we've called it the Hierophant. That just is something that's basically in control of your spiritual development, and it's a name that's given to a set of symbols, actually. But most people have seen a 6-pointed Star of David. That's going to be one of them, used in combination with other things. And then there's another one that finally, right before I was ready to pull this off the computer, they finally told me what it was, because I've been waking up with it in my head for the last 3 days, going, oh, I know it's important. And I knew before I woke up from the dream state that I knew what it was, and I couldn't pull the rest of the data. Well, it was finally given. It's this simple little thing called the Vesica Piscis, which is 2 circles. Now, if you look at the 6-pointed Star of David, that is a symbol for what's called the Merkaba field. They're counter-rotating spirals of electromagnetic energy that form at their center something called a form constant. There are sets of Merkaba fields that literally hold our consciousness all the way up the dimensional scale. And inside each of them, they create, first of all, a sphere. And those spheres intersect with each other. And this is where Vesica Piscis has to come in. There's sacred geometry that gets you fascinated about, oh, wow, there's something called sacred geometry, and oh, that's a Vesica Piscis, and you can identify, oh, they're sacred. If you ask most people that have studied the classes that say, why is that sacred? Okay, Vesica Piscis, the 2 circles interwoven, where you have one circle, find its center point, and from that point, you draw another circle downward, or upward, or overward. It's known to be a sacred symbol, but I haven't heard anybody explain to me why. They've connected it to certain other things. They have to do with mathematical interrelationships. But I have never seen anybody explain why these particular symbols have to do with literally giving you the power for manifestation. It is. It's the point of creation of light. It's the point of creation of the holographic, we call it, foundation, or the screen, upon which our consciousness will project portions of itself so it can look at itself in objectification. In truth, we're the consciousness of God, and all things out here are too. We're going to learn why these symbols, some of why these symbols are important. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm not going to get into the phi ratio, and I'm not going to get into the Fibonacci spiral and the golden mean rectangle and all that stuff. Because honestly, that information comes from a very ancient place called the Anunnaki Teaching Matrix. That information doesn't mean it's not true. It means, oh yeah, it's divine information, provided in a way that you can't exactly plug it in to quite do anything with yourself. But boy, does it keep your mental body focused on something outside of learning how to manifest. There are tricks for centuries and thousands of years and eons that have been done with sacred truth, by telling part of it in such a wonderfully fascinating way that gets you off track of how to use it. We're going to go to the core of simply how to use these things. We're going to use the Vesica Pisces as the embedding code, because that's what it is. It is a code that you can use to embed things in the DNA, and then you turn it into something else, which is the activating code. So there's a process of using symbols, which are scalar wave patterns of light and sound, mathematically organized, geometrically organized, to directly put desired thought forms into the right places in your DNA template, so you can become, so they can start their manifestation process, so you can start to see them in your hologram. It takes about 3 days if you do a good thought embedding. It takes about 3 days for the processes in the body, in the multi-levels of self, to begin projecting out. And that's because the way the frequencies are running in the planetary grids right now, when the frequencies are running properly in the planetary grids and in your body grids, it would be instantaneous. If you said, I will create a swan in my experience now, because you wanted to see a beautiful swan drift across a pond, that thought was a willed intention backed by desire, and it would go, boom, swan. That is the power that we have to look forward to eventually. Right now, we're relearning what it means. And it's a good thing, bless you, that we get to start slow. Because if we started fast, can you imagine, did you ever pay attention for any 10-minute period of what thoughts ran through your head? Did you ever notice how you can be extremely reactionary to certain things that happen outside of you? Oh, I'm fine, and I'm always thinking great stuff, and it manifests nice. And all of a sudden, like you're driving and you're thinking that, and some person pulls across, and you almost crash into them, and you go and you go off the side of the road. You don't get hurt, but you're really messed up your brand new BMW. All of a sudden, your thoughts are not quite doing the same thing they were when you're happily cruising down the road in your BMW that you just spent lots of money for. There's a part of manifestation that involves responsibility of learning, first of all, to observe your thoughts. And there's all sorts of words. You'll find, so where did that come from? Who is thinking that in my head? I don't even think about it. I don't even know that stuff. You will find stuff coming up from your other incarnations that's stored in the subconscious. But not only that, as we will learn, and some of us already have, time is simultaneous. Your other incarnations are selves that hold a portion of your consciousness that are in different space-time locations and different body patterns. You're connected through your DNA template. When you hit a certain level of DNA activation that is a point of vibration, they have a matching point. And when your point activates, it starts to bring through the energy and information and thoughts from that other portion of yourself. So when you start to become what is called mindful, becoming aware of what is going on in your mind, it's like a journey into a safari land with all sorts of foreign animals that you've never seen before, at least not in this life. It helps to, first of all, take it with amusement. I'm going to move through this, and no matter how awful, yucky, icky any of these might be, I'm not going to be affected by that. I'll just let them be, because once you let them be and move through you, they leave and go someplace else. They change into something else by the way you have reacted to them, because you add energy to them. These are the beginning processes of getting prepared to go into a place where all of a sudden you think swan and there it is. What if you think, you lousy creep, you made me crash my car, I hope you crash yours, bang. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. Then you better really remember really quick that I can reverse that. Okay, I didn't mean that at all. No, now you just get up in it if it never happened. So you learn to discreate what you created that you didn't want to create. There are processes and manifestations that go right down to how you're going to use physics in your body and in your mind. It goes down to the structure you have in your mental body systems, your emotional body systems, and your physical body systems, which is your density 1 level of self. But you have 4 other densities of self that you have to integrate into this process. Most manifestation techniques, quote, quote, that are out there right now in the New Age movement have to do with learning to manifest or seed thoughts from the 4th dimensional level. Wow. You're not going to get really good results manifesting directly just from your astral body. They're not going to have a lot of energy, and you're not going to have, from that level of awareness, you're not going to have the ability to place them where you want them, because there's a trick to manifestation. You say, okay, it's all a unified field of energy. Nothing is actually manifest. But boy, does it appear to be when you're here. I mean, you have like a body, and okay, it's a thought form, but if I go cut it with a knife, it bleeds, and if I go like jump off a cliff, it dies. So it seems really, really real while I'm here. This is an illusion, a holographic illusion, but it will be an illusion that binds you, that you will experience the cause and effect of that illusion, so long as you're focused within it. Now, where does that illusion come from? Where are you projecting this from? Is it like under my arm, or is it like below my feet, or is my brain doing it? Who's projecting this stuff? The interesting thing about projection of thought, perception of the hologram, is the fact that you will see as solid, projected outside reality, including your body, because this is part of your projected outside reality. It appears to be external, when nothing really is. The external stuff, you are perceiving it from exactly one-dimensional frequency band above its dimensional frequency band. If you are in third-dimensional consciousness, if your consciousness is focused in D3, your active consciousness that you call I am, that means you are perceiving the D2 reality field as physical reality. Now, each reality field is directly connected to one of the DNA strand templates. So, if you are in third strand activation, you will be having your consciousness in dimension 3, which means your strand 2 will be projecting out the hologram. So, if you want to change the hologram, you don't do it from D4, you don't go to the astral body. You project it down. You use the mental body and project it down. We have been being taught thought mechanics here that are the reverse of the way they work. So our thoughts don't get manifest the way we want them to, but they do get used as fuel and food for other people's thoughts that have nothing to do with what we want. There are little tricks that we learn as we learn the mechanics of manifestation, and we're not going to learn it all at once. I'm looking at some of this stuff and going, oh my God, what forms gluons? Now a gluon, and our guys didn't come up with that name. A gluon is something that our scientists have come up with down here that appears to hold the energy that links protons together inside the nucleus of atoms. It's like the glue that brings quarks together to form protons and those kind of things. There's a lot of levels of data to this. You don't have to know all of them. You don't have to remember all of them. Because honestly, I look at some of this stuff and say, great, I will remember this, I will know all of this probably within a week and be able to reiterate it off the top of my head. But don't ask me to teach a Kathara class next week. Because what's in that book, it's like I don't have enough room in my cellular memory to hold it. All right, so when we go into these processes, you'll hear new words and those kind of things. Some of them are more important than others. Don't worry if you can't remember them all. It's not a grueling course that, oh my God, to even use this, it's just too overwhelming. The processes become simple. The understanding or the explanations with the words and terms are just there to help your mental body realize that there is a linear, make sense, yes, this stuff is real connection to the action you're being guided to take with directing frequency. Because the mental body needs things strung out in a linear fashion. That's the three-dimensional level of your consciousness. The third strand of DNA governs that. The third level of consciousness needs to have linear sequential thought for it to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it bounces it out as if it doesn't fit. So what we are doing by learning the things that, okay, instead of just saying, here, do this, and it'll fix this for you, we're showing you, when you do this, it creates this. This is why it will fix that. It's helping your mental body to integrate the frequencies. One of the really sad things that's going on in the New Age movement right now is there are a bunch of teachers claiming to be ascended masters and all sorts of stuff that are teaching you, oh, that's just mental stuff. You don't need to learn that. Just open your heart and put the right intention and everything will just manifest the way you want it to be. They are teaching you not to integrate the mental body. You cannot integrate the emotional body or the physical body. With your spirit bodies, you cannot ascend without integration of the mental body as well. It is a trick that's being done to actually tap energy from people from the astral field, which is the fourth dimensional field, keep them clueless and under this illusion of kind of like denial, happiness kind of thing, ignorance is bliss. And it completely robs them of their ability to use their emotional energy or their strand 2 or their strand 1, which are necessary to bring things into manifestation here. So we will learn a different way of thought manifestation than anything I've seen taught out there so far. Most of the teachers out there aren't bad guys, but they've been talking to channels, and that's the problem. You don't need to be a channel. You need to have contact with interdimensional information, but there are ways to do it safely. The information given here was done safely. Okay, we're getting... Wow, it's already done. Excuse me. You know, okay. There's... It's going to be an interesting weekend. Yeah, I had no idea it was already 9 o'clock. Time does something weird, by the way. When I get on a roll, so and I try to be sensitive to if people look like they're like, you know, zoning out and passing out in the audience, I know that I've probably overkilled with frequency and it's time for a break. But I tend to like just keep going, and you know, when I get on to thought. Did they come back yet, those itinerary thingy? Okay. Okay, we have the itineraries, these things that I'm holding in my hand here. It's a 2-page thing. I call it a sort of itinerary because when I do an itinerary my way, it's very linear and organized, and it has, like, you know, section 1, you know, this time till that time, then there's break, and then we do section 2, very organized. You know, I was born with a Virgo imprint, so I'm a perfectionist. I've learned to surrender that when dealing with cosmic information. So these pages are here. You can take one of these. It will give you an idea of some of the, I called it topics and techniques of discovery because I refuse to put the word itinerary on it because an itinerary to me is much more sequentially organized. So I tell you what time you're going to, you know, go through what. This will give you an idea of some of the things we're going to be learning. And in truth, this was the one that was given for day 1. 2 pages worth. We've gone on this one from basic manifestation templates, consciousness manifestation templates, and the hologram of space-time, the tangibility of thoughts. What are thoughts? Where do thoughts come from? Where do thoughts go? That's the easy stuff. What is mind over matter? Then we get into conscious creation, mastering manifestation, introduction to the secrets of Merkaba creation, DNA embedding for manifestation, and embodying your heroic future now, Masters Manifestation Technique 1. We do thought seeding, initiating manifestation, activating manifestation, consummating manifestation, which means consummating it into your hologram, then clearing the holographic template so you can manifest what it is you want to manifest more accurately than what's happening right now, because our DNA has problems, because the planetary grids have problems. Now, the reason this information contains... It was on security release. I just want to say this real quick before I do the break. It was on security release because it gives enough information about the mechanics of manifestation where it gets close enough relationship to explaining templates in conjunction with matter particles that physicists and scientists and all sorts of other people, some from this planet, some not, that if they got a hold of those mechanics, they could do a lot of damage with them. These mechanics are only being released now because there's going to be a lot of damage done if they're not used for the right intention. We're going to be given these mechanics, and as we slowly learn to work with them, we'll be able to teach ourselves as we go home into our own daily lives. If you use them, just the techniques, even if you forget 90% of why you're using the technique other than that's supposed to help me manifest stuff that I want, right? It will help you to begin to empower yourself with the stuff that means something to you. However, it will give us as a group the ability to make changes in what's called the planetary manifestation template. This gets into information that I think we're going to cover to some degree on day 2, which involves what in Voyager's Volume 2 Secrets of Amenti book was called the Amenti Ascension Schedule, which has to do with the opening of the halls of Amenti stargates and the 3-day particle conversion period. There are certain things the indigos are going to be asked to do to keep the planetary grid stable and to create a protection field for the life forms on this planet for 3-day particle conversion. The name of this new book is called the Emerald Covenant Masters Templar Stewardship Initiative. That is the name they gave. It also could be called the Christos mission, but that's a lot more vague. Now, Stewardship Initiative is for people who want to not only help themselves in healing and getting a grip on their manifestation and getting a grip on their spiritual integration, but who want to help the planet. And it's more than that. During particle conversion, we're going to get visited. In fact, we're going to be the visitors, the way it looks. We're going to explore some things called mirage zones, which are transharmonic time cycles that pop into this reality field, I believe, once every 440 years, and they stay for 110 years, and then they pop out again. They're very good evacuation stations. They're opening in 2002. We're going to learn how magical reality really is. And we're going to, at some point, those of us who want to, and who really have their focus in the right place and their intentions and their motivations in the right place, there will at some point be contact. Not by me, but by a group called the Iani. E-Y-E-Y-A-N-I. The Iani is a word that means of the Yanis. And Yanis is an ancient word that means the ascended masters from the primal sound fields beyond the time matrix. The Iani are in inner earth, which is a reality field that runs at a 45-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin compared to ours. They have been the ones providing me with the information. They are the ones that I have had contact with since I was 4 years old, and actually since birth. I did conscious fetal integration, and I'm one of them, but they're a lot smarter than I am. They didn't have to deal with the grids on this level to block out all your knowledge. They will be making contact, and so will a group called the Maharaji. They're blue humans. They're blue-skinned. They're from Sirius B. They're one of the Guardian groups, the Guardians of Stargate 6 out of 12. They are the group that the person that was known as Joshua Melchizedek, or a.k.a. Jesus Christ, incarnated out of. He was out of that soul matrix when he came here. So this is what we're being prepared for. I was ready to deal with this in 2012. You know, like, okay, I'll get to the point where I can go out and publicly tell people, well, it looks like we're going to have some really wild stuff to see. And the interesting thing is, I said to the Iani, there's one thing I don't want to be, and I refuse to be, and that's a false prophet. I'm not into that stuff. And if you don't know darn well something's going to happen, don't you tell me it is, and don't you have me teaching people that it is. And they said, oh, what we tell you is going to happen. And look at it this way. If you find yourself in a reality system where it doesn't, realize you missed the boat, and you're in a place called Phantom Earth. And your body already incinerated, you just don't know it yet. There are big consequences to this, and there are big joys to this. We are approaching a time when things that even the Sci-Fi Channel people, their writers, haven't even come up with anything this good. You know, I certainly couldn't. So we're being prepared for a time of meeting our old family, of meeting the Iani. And this book is the beginning of their training course for the people who will be selected by them to serve as the primary guardian force of Earth's stargates here. There will be changes in the portion of the Earth that is called Bridge Zone Earth that we'll talk about a little bit. It's a timeline, one of the 3 timelines that a version of Earth is going to go on. And on that Earth, the Templar, or the planetary energy systems and stargates, are going to open, and they're going to stay open. And there are going to be energy systems, free energy systems, available on the planet. And there is going to be a group appointed as the protectors of those stargates, so they aren't used wrong, because you can literally blow up a planet in a galaxy if you use the stargate energies wrong. This is the beginning of an invitation into what's called the Emerald Covenant, Coevolution Peace Treaty, the Founders' Peace Treaty. It's an invitation to become part of the security team of the planetary, galactic, and universal levels of the stargates in the star system. It's an honor for me to bring this to you, and it was an honor to me when I was trusted with this material. So this is what all of this is about. And it's real hard to explain in a 3-day or 2-day workshop. But it's for something big. And we have the potential to see that big. And it will depend on where our angular rotation of particle spin is in our bodies, which timeline of the 3 we will find ourselves on, One is called phantom Earth, where that is not a positive reality field. That is literally where certain things happen that disconnect us from the rest of the time matrix, where you can't get back out and you get stuck. Your consciousness gets stuck and it can't reincarnate out. There's something called the bridge zone, which has to do with inner Earth. And then there's something called the ascension path, which has to do with a planet called Tara, the counterpart of this planet in density 2. These are the 3 tracks of time we're moving into. What we do between now and the time when particle conversion happens will determine where our angular rotation of particle spin is in our body and in the units of consciousness that we hold. That will determine what future we see. So it's very personal and it's very cosmic all at the same time. So I'm going to let us do our break now. It's not too bad, like 10 minutes later than usual. Just do a 15-minute break. 15, that wasn't 50. Yeah. And these papers are up here for anybody that wants them. Told me that they were there the whole time. And it has a little card on it that says, Ashana from all, we love you. And I'd just like to thank you very much for the beautiful flowers, whoever, organized that. And I apologize for having them in my negative space where I couldn't see them, Now I'm seeing them in the positive, so they're very beautiful. Thank you. Alrighty. Now, we'll probably, I should know better than to do this, but we'll probably wrap up around 10:15. I say that because probably that means we'll be out of here by 10:30. I tend to go over time. Now, there's so much information that we're going to be covering, and it's going to be really fun because I'm going to be up all night sequencing the first dose of this, tonight. So I will try to have the paperwork for you that, gives you something to hang on to so you can take home with you. What I want to do tonight, there's a couple of things that particularly if we're dealing with, people of different levels of observation, where, if you don't know some of this work, there's a lot of things that I've talked about spontaneously that ended up in other workshops that you might not have heard before. So you might have all sorts of questions on things, but actually they were already answered someplace else. And if you ask me where, sometimes I know and sometimes I don't. It's just in one of those videos back there in one of the workshops. What I find is interesting is when people have questions, people are interconnected energy fields. And when a person in a group has a question, they're very often speaking for the subconscious imprinting in some of the other people in the group. So if a question comes to your mind, it's very likely that it's a part of a larger question pattern that is affecting other people that it just might not have come to their consciousness yet. Now, one question that came up over break, and it was a very good one, and I've had this question come up before, and I have gone into, I forget how long it was probably like a 45-minute dissertation on it. I won't do that this time. But it was a question that has to do with source and has to do with the very spiritual aspects of how one looks at things when you reach a certain level of consciousness, let's say ascended master consciousness or something like that. I'm going to try, because I believe and I feel that this question is important to acknowledge because it speaks for more than one person, more than the person that asked the question. I'm also aware that it's a perspective that gave birth to the question. There's a perspective of ideas that have to do with about 80% true and about 20% Anunnaki teachings that teach you a certain way of looking at something that uses truth, but to edit a part of it in order to get us into a place where we choose, how would I put it, simply non-action in our quest to be more like Source or to be more of Source. Source, the collective consciousness that people call God, Source is a still point, but Source is also all action and activity in the universe and all universes. So Source is not simply a stationary thing that's in a state of perfection and does not move, does not experience itself in different ways. Now, I won't be able to quote the question exactly, but I will try to round the question up in a way that I can get to a point that I'm feeling guided that should be brought out, because there's an issue an issue called balance, that is the answer to the question, that can help us understand a lot of things about how the nature of manifestation works and what really is our role in relation to the process of finding out we're creators. The question had to do with, let's see if I can put this correctly. It had to do with negative and positive. It had to do with acceptance. And it had to do with action versus non-action. The question had to do with, if one goes into the higher states of consciousness and becomes an ascended master, or how I would put it is at the place where we all are ascended masters, isn't it true there that all polarity is dissolved and there is no preference, is what I understood the question to come to, that we simply learn to accept all things. We simply learn to accept and love all things, because as source, we know that all things are part of us and manifestations of us and take place within us. There is a truth and a fiction to that, all at the same time. As source, as the one source, source is the consciousness that becomes the negative and the positive polarity in electrical charge, that becomes electromagnetism. It is the identity that becomes the force of order and the force of chaos. It is the identity that becomes the force that down here we might judge as good versus evil, or manifestation versus demanifestation. These are the polarities that exist within Source, because it is necessary to have polarity if you desire to experience the hologram of projection. So therefore, Source does allow for and create the negative side of things as well as the positive side of things. When we move into a space of incorporating more of our sourceness, where we get more of that consciousness into our bodies, we do have a different relationship to judgment. The words good and evil don't mean the same things anymore. Evil becomes understood as a state of ignorance and innocence to knowing. But that doesn't mean that all actions are perceived equally and desired equally by Source. Now, if we follow the thought pattern or the idea that Source is a unified field, indeed Source is in its wholeness, Source is a unified field, and therefore is in a state of vibrational harmonization or vibrational co-resonance, which is the feeling we call love, with all things in the universe. And you cannot judge, which is pushing away and separating, and love, which is harmonizing and pulling together, at the same time while you are in polarity. However, Source can do this because Source is simultaneously in polarity, manifesting as polarity and manifesting as wholeness, coexistent. Polarity exists within the wholeness. If we follow the thought pattern that our job is to transcend polarity consciousness, which is making judgments about things. Oh, this is good and that's bad. This is evil and that's holy. This is negative and that is positive. And we assign a value to one of those that's better than the other. It is true that we are missing a point. The point is that they both coexist, and to have one you must have the other. Source creates manifestation because it has a desire. It is an intelligence that has feeling that's a little different than how we experience emotion, but it's direct cognition feeling. It has a desire, and from the desire comes an intention or a cognition, and then an intention, and then a will, and then a thought form, and then a manifestation. The core desire of why creation takes place is because Source desires to know itself continually and perpetually in as many new ways as it can. Of course, it's all simultaneous, or new and old, or kind of like only terms you can experience when you're in the hologram of polarity. In order to create an experience for itself, in which Source could study, explore, expand, express itself in all sorts of different forms to know itself fully. The framework for polarity was created. The cosmic matrix, which is called the energy matrix, which is a certain way that Source organized units of its consciousness within itself in order to create polarity of those units to set in motion first vibration, because Source was a still point, all just still and knowing. And inside itself, it decided it wanted to know movement, action, individuation, expression in a different form. So in reality fields that are constructed on dimensionalization, Source created a structure for that dimensionalization to occur. It created the structure by sending into opposite electrical charge and magnetic charge. There's something called base electrical and base magnetic, which is force, or the way consciousness of Source interacts with itself. This began the process of creating, or set a template for creating, a reality field within itself, almost as if you're sitting there closing your mind and you want to think of, okay, I want to experience this type of thing. So you create a thought form. Well, the whole universal cosmic structure is a thought form of Source that takes place within Source, just like you can close your eyes and make an image in your head. This is how reality is perceived from the Source level. Now, the original intention of Source in creating a polarized universe was to be able to fulfill the experience of expressing and knowing itself in individuation, in many forms. Source is dimensional structure. It is the units of consciousness that form dimensional structure. Source consciousness is the consciousness of the planets, of the galaxies, of every energy force that it's known throughout the galaxies, and of every individual. The time matrix, or the cosmic matrix, you have cosmic matrix and then the smaller time matrix within it, are platforms of consciousness within Source that Source can play and experience itself in all sorts of different types of form and interaction of form. Now, in order to have what we call positive experience, or let's say an experience that creates the feeling of joy and expansion and happiness inside of ourselves, that's what those things look like from down here. When you're in a polarized body, you will, until you bring it to the next level up, experience happiness or sadness, where you're experiencing in separate pieces the wholeness or the totality. When we get to the question of, does Source have a preference? Since Source is both, does that mean Source endorses action that could be perceived as so destructive that it could literally destroy the framework itself? This is where the question of, is it our job to just simply become so much of Source that we have no value judgment at all toward either negative or positive? The answer to that part of the question is yes, that's right. The idea is to acknowledge both exist, to realize that to have one you must have the other, therefore both are essential and necessary. So you do not impose one value that's different from the other on the core condition of creation. You know negative and positive must exist. Particle and antiparticle must exist if you're going to have a holographic experience in which to know yourself as Source. However, that framework of reality, that framework, is dependent upon units of consciousness in Source being organized in a specific way. It's a delicate balance of energy particles, of positive energy particles compared to negative energy particles. When I say particles, I'm talking about, we can take it into physics, where we go into the charge, the electrical charge that particles have. Some have a negative electrical charge, some have a positive electrical charge. When we're dealing with Source at that level, up past D15 and past the primal sound fields into expansion, we're dealing with something beyond electromagnetic energy. There it is acknowledged that both polarities are important. Both are equally loved, equally valued, equally intentionally created, with an original intention to be able to experience objectification and externalization. This is where balance becomes the key. Because in the holographic framework, if one or the other side of those things got too far out of balance with the other, you would create a situation within Source where the thought form kind of imploded on itself. In physics terms, that is exactly what particles will do. If the balance of negative and positive forces are not held within that still point at their center, which is the Source intention, the intention itself can become compromised, and Source does not permit that to occur. Source also is aware that when you are in polarization, you as a part of Source, as part of the consciousness that once upon a time you were the one that decided to do this, but once you come in to objectification, your form will determine how much awareness you can take with you in that particular lifetime. While you're in polarization, the realities of polarity will literally be manifest in your consciousness and in your body. You will have experience of joy, this feels good, pain, this feels not good. You can learn to react to pain in a way where you say simply, oh, this is energy too. And you can go to joy and say, and this is energy too, which takes you into a different space of feeling. It raises the emotional body to a higher level, where you can say, I acknowledge both. You can acknowledge both and choose to stand back from it, which in truth is called denial. Or you can acknowledge both and fully allow them to run through you, both polarities. And when they run through you, when you don't assign a value or push either one of them away, they transmute. They come together, the polarities, particle and antiparticle, that compose those thought forms, come together, transmute, turn into antimatter, and go to the next level up. You progressively transmute the polarities so you expand back into Source. There is a distinction between choosing not to value judge, well, I like good better than bad. You know, I like positive better than negative. Some people like it the other way around. If you can realize both are the experience of energy and consciousness in polarity, both are valid, they are fine. But while you're in polarity, one will feel more expansive and one will feel more contracting. Source is aware of itself, being in polarity, simultaneously being in wholeness. It doesn't fear for its ability to expand back into itself, for it knows it can't become lost. It knows it can experience the absolute worst thing that can happen to a being or a universe, which is, in the physics terms, implosion, which is hitting a point of contraction so severe that the template of that form or that planet or that universe literally fragments and goes back to simple units of the consciousness of Source. Now, they still exist within Source. They're not separate from it, but those units of the consciousness of Source hold very, very little recognition of the significance of knowing itself. It's the difference between being unconscious of your relationship to anything else, space dust, or progressively expanding your form to hold the knowledge, the wisdom, the knowing, the vibration of the entire time matrix, and then the energy matrix beyond it, and then Source. We all go back to Source one way or the other. We go back either through fragmentation completely, where we become undifferentiated units of consciousness that do not hold memory of the journey that they were on. They're just as blessed. Or we can go back in the full expansion by which we literally internalize again the entire frequency patterns of a 15-dimensional matrix, the sound matrix beyond it, energy matrix, and then expand back into Source with full knowing. There's a difference between being a conscious co-creator with and as Source, or being the substance of itself that Source will use in its active phase to create with. When we come to the point of recognizing that, first of all, getting caught in polarity consciousness means dividing things up into good versus bad, and I prefer this, so I'm going to push that away from me. As soon as you push it away, you're guaranteeing you're going to lock yourself into a relationship with it. You need, really, Energetically speaking, it's exactly what you do. We need to integrate, but there's a teaching that's put out, and it's inspired by what's called the Ruby Order Matrix, which is a branch of the Anu Elohim. The Anu Elohim were once a part of the family called the Elohai Elohim, which are the founders' races. They became what was called a fallen angelic matrix, a fallen founders' matrix. They attempted to lock the life field in this time matrix by using the divine science mechanics in a certain way that would allow them to not have to go into co-resonance with Source, which means not have to co-create with Source, where they didn't have to listen, in other words. They went into something called code convolution, which is like a little too much inbreeding, where your template gets all messed up and you get some really strange outcomes that weren't intended. The Anu Elohim have been there's a whole history that we have already revealed in the other workshops, and some of it is in this Templar book, that explains what the original fall was, what the original sin was. We don't endorse the concept of sin, but we're showing you where that concept came from. The Anu Elohim created a race called the Anunnaki in reaction to the founders' races, the Christos founders' races, who were at one-ment and co-resonance with Source. The founders' races created humans, or what became the human race line as an angelic race line, as a team that was sent in to bring back into balance certain things that had gone far too out of balance into the chaos principle. Because this time matrix was about ready to explode, because its stargates had been compromised to such a degree by the fallen Anu Elohim. The Anu Elohim, fallen angelics, are very beloved. The founders' races acknowledge fully that you're us, but the Anu Elohim do not acknowledge that. They are taking the stance of Source being ignorant to itself, of being innocent to remembering its oneness. The Anu Elohim and the Anunnaki race lines that they created have a very long history of promoting the conflict on this planet and in others in this time matrix. They've created a group in what's called Dimension 11 that attempts to hijack the consciousness in this life field in order to drain it of energy so they can stay self-perpetuating without having to make the higher connections to the higher dimensional fields and to Source to get a perpetual supply of energy. Humans were created as an intrinsic part of that particular drama. Source created them as that. Source created Anunnaki as the other thing, because Source is exploring itself in unknowing in the Anunnaki and Anu Elohim races. It wasn't a part of the original intention of this time matrix. However, because Source is all, even something that is in opposition to the original intention that was set by Source will be embraced, harmonized, brought into the pattern, and stabilized so it can achieve a state of harmonization so it becomes part of the one. In terms of the Anunnaki races, it meant helping them to heal. So they had the potentiality of ascension because their destiny would take them back into space dust. They didn't have the templates that would allow them to get out of a time matrix. The Anunnaki races, and this isn't going to be a discussion on the history of the Anunnaki. I've done a lot of that already in other frameworks, in other workshops. And some of it's in that book, and there's more coming out in a book that we have coming out supposedly in November. It was another quick one that my publisher is going to be publishing. It's called The Forbidden Testaments. Forbidden Testaments of something or other. Anyway, they're forbidden. I can't remember. There's so many titles. Yeah, the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation. That was it. They were the original things that were in the several books of what became Revelations in the Bible that talked about in detail all of these type of things. So I don't have to spend, this workshop isn't about that particular book. This is about information we need first. But I brought up the Anunnaki because right now we're in the middle of a situation since 25,500 BC on this planet where there has been a progressive corruption of the teachings of sacred mechanics here in order to get human consciousness to be in a particular position of non-action, where it is tricked into thinking it is behaving like Source and as Source if it simply chooses to do nothing and let the illusion roll on. That is called a state of detachment. It is the opposite of the state of love, which is vibrational harmonization, which is full engaging. We are being tricked using the concept of understanding source, where it is neutral as far as value judgment goes. Both are beloved. Both polarities are beloved and part of the self. However, source is not neutral when it comes to the original intention. To have a time matrix, to have a reality field where both polarities could exist, so that experience could be known. We are being programmed by twisted teachings, 80% good stuff, 20% twist, and if you don't know enough of the mechanics, you can't see the twist. We're being taught to project our thoughts in a way that will render us as undifferentiated units of consciousness, which are what other forces that have their consciousness intact use to create things with. We are being disempowered by a twist on those. Yes?
But wouldn't you consider that Buddhism was a form of detachment, that its teachings were to be detached?
Buddhism was originally part of one of the 12 tribes doctrines that were taken off the Doratura plates. See, there are 12 tribes of angelic humans seated on this planet. Each one of them was given guardianship over one of the 12 CDD plates, place of Doratura plates. Those plates were created by the founders to hold a certain level of information that had to do with mechanics, with science, with social order, with spiritual development, with relationship to source, relationship to the other races. Buddhism was originally part of the sacred teachings. So was what we call Christianity. So was what we call the Jewish faiths. Originally, all of the religions on the planet right now represented a portion of one of those 12 plate teachings. When you put them all together, they gave the full externalization, to the degree that this stuff could be put into externalization, of the reality of what it meant to be a part of Source. Now, everyone, and this is what we got into in the Atlantean conspiracy when we talked about that in the England and Ireland workshops, where we began to reveal that information. There has been a progressive infiltration of our race lines here to create DNA mutation. There has been a progressive, there was a great house cleaning in 9558 BC. Literally, ships coming in and getting rid of, using photosonic weaponry, everything they could find that would give evidence that there were ancient human cultures that spanned millions of years. There was a house cleaning done. And then there were some stories taken. Stories from the original plates that have been translated were taken and twisted. Every one of the religions at this point has been contaminated. And you can read them, and it's like, how do you separate the shaft from the grain? You can't tell. The religions have been polarized, where one side is expressing truth, and the other side is expressing its opposite. And you can't tell unless you start to really get into the frequency behind what those words are saying, because words are mathematical programs, sound tones. So you asked about Buddhism. There are certain teachings in there that are true. You can reach a state, there are things that teach about nirvana. That's a certain level of consciousness that corresponds to, I believe, D11. Interestingly, home of the fallen Adam Elohim, and a lot of other good guys too. But there are teachings from D12 that take you beyond the nirvanic state, which is your beginning of detachment from matter in order to flip through and make the transition into antimatter. Then there's a whole expansion again where you engage again. If you completely go into detachment, saying, well, it's all the same to me, do you really think Source just says it's all the same to me, I'm going to go do something else, and just lets it run? See, this isn't what happens, but this is what the Anunnaki teachings or infiltration of good teachings has tried to do. It's tried to make Source out to be a force that says, oh, I created this, and I'm totally neutral, so I don't care if people are suffering and feeling terrible. That's their problem. They're down there now. They'll evolve to become bigger where they don't have to feel that anymore because they can choose not to identify with the pain. If Source were coming from that level of consciousness, personally, I'd want to find another one. If that was what God was like, because it would show me something that's different from me. Well, wait a minute, if we're all manifestations of God, yes, okay, part of Source might look at it that way. But which part? The part that fully knows itself or the part that forgot the rest of itself? The part that's in negative polarity or the part that's in wholeness? I know that beings, even in polarity, if their templates are intact with dimensional structure so they can receive the consciousness coming down from source into their templates, have a huge compassion for everything. They progressively learn to embody the state called unconditional love, which is a state of vibrational harmonization or co-resonance between this and anything else outside of it, so everything becomes a part of you. When you are in a state of love with a thing or a being, you can compare it to your children or to something that really inspires that love feeling. It is the opposite of total detachment. Now, if you go for attachment, you end up strangling the thing you love and it runs away. You push it away. There is a balance between engaging and disengaging. There's a still point in between those two things that allows the state of love to happen. This is the state that the Eastern religions were originally trying to help us develop that level of consciousness. But there are teachings out there right now. And, it's really funny. There are two basically infiltration teachings that are happening. You have three representatives on this planet here. You have people who are getting information from what's called the Draconian matrix, which is a D10 fallen angelic, the fallen seraphim matrix. They're the reptilian races, and like the Zetas and those guys are all of the fallen seraphim races. And then you have the D11, which is a little higher in consciousness, fallen Anu Elohim matrix, with their Anunnaki contacts, and boy, have they been busy. They've been teaching us some great stuff. 80% good, 20% twist. And then you have the founders. The angelic humans of this planet are representatives of the founders, and there are some of the Anunnaki and Draconian fallen races who came into human form as part of the Emerald Covenant bioregenesis program, so they could get their templates back and evolve to be Christed beings and beyond again. Right now, we're in an amazing period of time because you have all the forces confronting each other. And if you look at it in terms of matter, particles, antiparticles, and antiparticles, the Trinity, the Divine Trinity, it's even represented in the belief systems and in the interstellar contacts that are happening right now, and in relation to the people who are incarnate on the planet right now. There are people that are in human form, that appear to be in human form on the outside, who did not incarnate out of the human matrix at all. Some of them are Anunnaki consciousness that are good guys, that evolved and got their Christos template back, and they're here to help balance and heal the drama. Same thing on the Draconian side. But then there are also races we call the Illuminati races that are representing the fallen angelic creeds. One of the things the fallen angelics do is they teach you detachment, so you kind of walk around and not care much. How they control the people who are in human forms, which means they have the potential to evolve back to being Christed. How they control them is they make sure one level of consciousness can't talk to the next, where the people just see 3D and they don't think anything else exists. So if something comes and whispers, "Hi, I'm from a higher system. I'll give you this sacred knowledge. Follow me. Give me your power, and I will get you, to whatever it is you want," right? This is how people that were called the Illuminati races, the ones that work in certain aspects of world government, certain aspects of world religion, certain aspects of the world management team that we don't know about and we don't hear about on the news, that are controlling and running agendas here that are very, very detrimental to this planet and its people. They are really the greatest victims, but they're the victims of their own consciousness from the higher levels, because it's literally those people who have incarnated out of one of the fallen matrices. Now, they're all in Source. They're all parts of Source. That's why the only appropriate response to them is love. The only way you're going to heal them is to love them. But that doesn't mean just open your heart and turn your mind off so we can suck your energy off your astral body. Because your heart center, your fourth chakra, is your fourth dimensional aspect of your chakra vortice system, energy distribution system. Brings energy in from D4. Connected to your fourth DNA strand template, and it's connected to the astral level of your biofield. So if something from D4 wants to feed off you,
It'll tell you to open your heart and turn off your mind. You don't need to know that. Just let the angel handle it for you. All of this stuff is trickery. The founders will teach you that you have a level of you that is a founder. They will teach you that you don't need to worship a Christ outside of yourself because you have one right inside of yourself. You also have a rishi. Hindu religions talk about the rishis, and they have been twisted to where Hindu people will bow down and grovel and hand their power over to a rishi because the twist has said that I have this and I am a superior being and you're a lowly being and you don't have this, which is an utter lie. Any being down here, it implies the fact that you have the rest. What makes the difference between what level you will express compared to somebody else is how much of your consciousness you can get into your body. It's not that you don't have it already, because you do. We're all ascended masters. Now, we chose as ascended masters to come into a reality system with a specific template that happens to be our body blueprint. We chose why we wanted to come, and we chose our body blueprint in relation to why we wanted to come. If we came for just kind of like a sojourn through the densities, and I'll help out here and there, but we really had a real kind of tough time last time, let's just kind of enjoy it and be, you'll come with a smaller DNA template, because you don't need to anchor so much of your frequency in your consciousness. It's still up there. You'll bring in to manifestation only as much as you need. It's energy economy. Plus, it's kind of like systems are kind of like classrooms that you apply for and see if there's room. If we all decided we were going to come into a system and be fully activated, ascended masters, but it was only a density 1 system in dimensions 1, 2, and 3, ascended master consciousness is up in the primal sound fields, which has 24 times 15 charge, let's put it that way. You try to bring even one full one in, which would come into about 1,728 times 24 individuals, you blow the place up if you brought in too many. So it's kind of like, okay, I'll play Ascended Master this time, you'll play, root race person this time. But at a certain level, we know we're all equal. Same with the fallen angelics. They're not bad guys, because at that level, really, good and bad don't apply. God pretending it's awake and God pretending it's asleep is more like it. Because God wants to know itself. And if it's going to know itself awake, well, that implies asleep. What would that be? So there is a level where it is all okay. And there are teams of consciousness that come in, the source manifests itself as, that are the balance keepers. They're the restorers when balance is out. They're called the security team. In this time matrix, it's the Azurite security team, which was the original race that was created to serve that purpose. A race called the Oraphine came out of that, which meant sons of light, and not sons, boys, but suns, flaming balls of light. Yeah. Beyond gender, beyond polarization. The Oraphine were the seed race, the host race, that another race called the Turanicium, which was a downstep of the Oraphine, came into. The Turanicium is the name of the human race. So the fact that we call ourselves the Azurite Temple of the Melchizedek Cloister, Melchizedek is a sound tone frequency that corresponds to the particular family of consciousness of Janus that seeded this time matrix. Melchizedek is a tonal signature of that collective, of Janus, whose consciousness is in here as all of us in this time matrix, including the fallen angelics. That's them too. Azurite refers to the first race of peacekeepers, sort of. But sometimes it's not peacekeepers. Sometimes it's not war starters, but sometimes it's hands-offers, where at times intervention is appropriate. Where if you have a force that is created, where Source created a force of beings to come in as an expression of Source to just keep the balances. Sometimes keeping the balances is just standing back and letting the scales do this. It's only when it goes like this and the other scale is like ready to fly off the thing, which would be like explosion of the time matrix. That's when the force that came in to keep the balances will exert action. When things can balance themselves and come to their natural thing, where you have, certain reality systems will have warring and polarity in the lower densities. Non-intervention is usually the stance that will be taken because the beings that are having the problems are trusted. It's known that they have higher levels of consciousness, and they're trusted to eventually get past that rough spot and be able to get their next level of consciousness in. It's only when the beings get so lost in the illusion of the hologram that at times intervention is needed. When non-intervention is chosen, a lot of people say, well, if they care, why don't they do something? You know, it's horrible. Look at all the horrible things that have happened even in human history on this planet. And believe me, these are mild when you start to see what happened in the last 950 billion years since the last life wave come into this time matrix. We have been given the main important parts of the history that have happened since then. And this looks mild. The things that have happened here, which are pretty awful compared to what we're used to thinking. If you're going to make a value judgment, no, I wouldn't want to experience them again. But there is there is a delicate balance for every person, every manifestor. Because remember, you're a part of God that forgot that you were a part of God. You are a manifestor. You are a thought creator. You will create thoughts consciously or unconsciously. If you create them unconsciously, they'll do what they want to, and you usually end up with chaos. If you choose and learn to relearn what you knew up at these higher levels anyway, to create, you can create order and balance. But there is a still point between 2 points of action called vibration and oscillation. Vibration is contraction and energy holding. Our scientists here haven't quite identified this yet, but a few of them have put it out and they're kind of like picked on by the other physicists because, no, it's not our standard theory. No, it isn't. You have vibration here, which is energy holding, which is base magnetic particle template. And over here, you have the opposite of that. You have oscillation. You can look at it as light bulbs. Over here, you have the light bulb off and the energy contracts. It was as if it was hiding inside of the light bulb. And over here, the light turns on and expands. You have contraction and expansion. And when one side contracts, the other expands. As long as that balance is kept, and that balance is kept through the still point in the center. So you have particle, contracting particle, base magnetic. You have antiparticle, base electrical, expanding. And you have the still point within, which is the place where the two of them are held together in their original unified form. That's the point of balance that allows both to exist. This is a pattern that's repeated in everything, from molecular construction to cosmic template construction, to how our hologram is projected outward into what appears to be objectified manifestation. So it's the point of balance that we're looking for when we come into saying, okay, I'm going to remember that I'm a creator, and I'm going to start to try to learn how to remember, how to create consciously. You need to learn a balance between when to put energy in, when to take it out, and when to hold it still. When to go into direct engagement, or its opposite, which would be total detachment, or the center point, which is engaged detachment. That's where you put the two together. The greatest reflection of the consciousness of Source, going back to the original question that I brought out here, was the real nature of Source isn't detachment where it doesn't have a preference. It has full allowance and allows all things. But its most full expression is fully engaged detachment, where it is fully detached and fully engaged in the reality field, which means it's feeling, it's experiencing, it's acting, that's being fully engaged. And at the same time, it is still, it is quiet, it is non-intervening, it is not acting. Source stays at a point of creation and manifesting and not creation and not manifesting anything, all at the same time. I wanted to bring out the basic point because there's a lot of this. The person who brought it up, I'm glad, I don't know if it answered all of it completely, but it was enough to bring out a point. I would thank the person who asked the question about it. I would thank the person because I think it's important that we first of all realize that there have been influences here, particularly in the New Age movement, particularly in the last 100 years, where the channeling movement just seemed to happen to pop up. It was planned. Channeling movement was planned since 25,500 BC as the finalization of a series of actions that were taken to take over the halls of Amenti Stargates. it's really important that we realize we have within us the still point, which is that full point of connection to Source in its wholeness, that has an understanding that if we learn to open it in ourselves, we can listen to what others have to say, but we'll never, ever again hand our power over to somebody else. When I teach you, I play role of teacher. Actually, we both play role of teacher. We are both teachers and students all at the same time. If a person's trying to take your power, they'll say, I'm a guru, follow me. I'm so much higher than you. And you have no hope of ever being able to handle yourself, so let me do it for you. That is a very classic authority relationship that's used by both Anunnaki and Draconian fallen angelics. Why? Because they want to get into your biofield so they can start controlling your energy systems, because they know you are a piece of Source that has creative potential that you can use. They'd rather use it for their own manifestations. There's a lot that we're going to learn when we move into the information on this sheet. And I know that this is the beginning of this dispensation. This dispensation was due out about 2008. So we're getting the summarized, capsulized version that will get us to the point where we can understand enough to begin using effective action. There's no obligation to be a planetary steward, other than the fact that all humans were originally created and agreed to come into incarnation for that purpose. If you choose to, nobody's going to get mad at you, But we all get to see the outcome of our choices. We get to know ourselves through the effect of the cause that is our consciousness. With the Templar initiatives, the Stewardship Initiative program, we're being prepared to, first of all, get our frequencies high enough, even if we don't want to do anything about dealing with the planet right now. It's too overwhelming, I'm trying to deal with my wife, that kind of thing. That's a state of growth that we all hit at some point or another, sometimes frequently. You get to a point and finally, everything is great, and then 2 weeks later it all falls apart again, and you're back to square one at a different level. Right? So there's Source, or the guardian races, the founders races. They do not judge people. They know humans as manifestations of themselves that came down into human form in order to serve the role of planetary stewards. But part of that service is serving the self at the same time. It's not saying self is more important than collective, and it's not saying martyring yourself, where collective is more important than Source, because both of those things will keep you in polarity. And the objective of the game is to bring the polarities together, heal them, and raise them to the next level of frequency. That's called ascension. When we get into the issues of mastering manifestation, we're going to deal with the concept of free will choice and natural polarity. We'll deal with polarized thinking versus unity consciousness. Is there a versus, or are really they aspects of the same thing? Creation and the still point. We'll get into subconscious and the rational and the superconscious minds a little bit. The thing that is most important out of the information that they've given, and because of the way the information is being given, where there is still probably another 2 pages of just telling me what I'm supposed to get across to people by the end of Sunday, because technically this was Saturdays, but there's no way the time frame is going to allow all of this to be covered in depth on Saturday. So we'll get as far as we can with this on Saturday. It's going to go into the new stuff. There is still something on security clearance. I can feel it. It's in my field. But I cannot open it until Sunday. It can't be. There's a reason for security clearance. Security clearance means if you have information of, let's say, D13 or 14 or 15, they're considered the Rishik levels of information, where there is a greater understanding of the mechanics of how to access and use power down here. If beings that are following fallen angelic agendas get a hold of those mechanics and use them, it can create damage. Because the fallen angelics at D11 can't access that information because it's from higher than their dimensional field. They can't pull it into their templates. Same thing with the ones at D10. But when you start to give it to somebody down here who has enough coding in their DNA to anchor it and begin its translation, it enters the unified field, which means it starts to dimensionalize, which means the fallen angelics can access parts of it, take it, distort it, and get it out before we do, and start misleading people with it or harming people with it. So the reason why my life is made slightly crazy, where I get sometimes 2 hours before I have to deliver a major presentation, if it's on security clearance, where it would cause more harm to release it early than it would to drive me slightly kooky, trying to get it all down in 2 hours' time. They will keep the security on it. There is something that has to do with the bigger part. Now, we're going to talk about tomorrow. We'll start with the personal stuff. We'll start with the manifestation templates and understanding the structure, understanding our thoughts. So we begin to understand the power that we have to work with, and also the identity levels that we have that correspond to those powers. And then we'll learn the technique, where we can start to play with this power, or make it ours, Of course, in original intention, or divine right order, as some people call that. Then we're going to go into the planetary stewardship issues. And this is where the security lock is still on. It was only 2 days ago that they let me know that the schedule was pushed up to no later than 2006, but most likely 2003, for the opening of the Halls of Amenti. There were a whole series of agendas that the Draconian fallen angelic races, the Anunnaki fallen angelic races, and the good guy founders races that are trying to support the life field in this time matrix rather than sap its energy. There were a whole bunch of things each group planned to do to fulfill their agenda. These things, I have a feeling, are getting ready to manifest into our 3D reality a little more clearly. There has been, from Dimension 11 in our time matrix on down. Now, each dimension is part of a set of 3 that's called a harmonic universe. Each harmonic universe has many galaxies, many, many galaxies, a whole universe unto itself. From D11 on down, there has been a war going on between the 3 groups. The guardian races don't fight, per se. They simply hold ground and frequency, and they protect the stargates and others, and they try to assist the ones that are making choices that are going to harm themselves and others. They try to assist them to evolve and to heal and to choose better. Progressively, there's an old saying, as above, so below. Eventually, what's happening up here in frequency works its way down. I'm getting a little bit of kind of tap me on the shoulder and say, you can say this much here. We've been tracking a bit of the agendas on, this is the grand hurrah that everybody's been waiting for, the stellar activation cycle of 2000 to 2017, supposedly. We've been waiting for this since 22,326 BC, when the last one could have occurred, but didn't, because our races were invaded by fallen angelic forces. There were agendas that have progressively moved us forward through time to this point, and many of them have not been pleasant. The fact that we're in this time period now, as a race, not remembering who we are, not knowing how we got into a baby body or where we go when we leave a body, or the fact that we were a race that was created as an immortal race that didn't die, it simply ascended when it wanted to and came back when it wanted to. A race that has become clueless and trapped in 3-dimensional hologram. It was no accident that we were reduced to this condition, let's say. There were both fallen angelic matrices wanted us to be, when this stellar activation occurred, completely incapable of doing the planetary security job of running the Templar, running the Stargates in the Christos template. We were supposed to fix the problem of infiltration here by getting what is called a 12th dimensional security seal, a Maharic seal, put on the planet, through the planet. It's a natural seal that comes up when you activate the planetary grids the right way with the Stargates, and it has to be done in the stellar activation cycle. So everybody has been waiting for the big party time, which is the next stellar activation cycle. It's this time. If things were left, if, let's say, non-intervention was chosen at this point in time, if Source decided, well, we just won't intervene, just let it do what it needs to do. What it would need to do, because of the situations that have been set up, is the fallen angelic would get control here. The Armageddon scenario that was in the Bible was a translation, a twisted one, of some information that was originally in the books that were written by John the Baptist and Joshua Melchizedek that talked about the stellar activation and the particle conversion period coming up, and the fact that there were two Anunnaki factions and one main Draconian faction that planned to duel it out to see who was going to get control of Earth. Both of them would get humans out of the way and neutralize them. Why they want Earth is because Earth has the connection to inner Earth and parallel Earth, like all planets have their connection to the inner systems and to the parallel. But Earth has the halls of Amenti stargates, which hold a technology, a divine technology when it's used properly. It's called the Crystal Pylon Temple Network. Now, this is a manifest technology of massive crystals. I mean, imagine crystal rods, quartz crystal rods, bigger than the size of the Empire State Building, and lots of them. These are the technologies, the natural technologies that are used to run, to operate manually, a planet Stargate system. Our Stargate system here was damaged 560 million years ago. That's how Earth ended up in density 2. It had evolved out of density 2, and it fell back. That's the fall, the story of the fall in the Bible. The Bible is coded and has partial truths and a whole bunch edited. If there was an intervention by the founders at this point, the Armageddon scenario would emerge. The Armageddon story was promoted among what's called the Jehovian Anunnaki, which are the Sirius A bipedal dolphin people. If you see them in their form, they're a density 2 race line. That means they're in semi-etheric matter density. They look like standing upright dolphins. They can breathe air or water. They're a fallen angelic race strain out of the Anu Elohim collective. Well, they fight with another group, the aquatic ape Anunnaki. These are the Palladian Nibiruan Anunnakis. You know, those guys, they're talking to everybody these days. Every channel will listen. They're walking in all over the place by body snatching. Those two groups were going to duel it out. And they were going to have it's a three-way fight. One with the Draconian matrix, which is called, there are several facets to the Draconian reptilian matrix. One, you have the Omicron matrix, which is the D10 consciousness. The form that they have is etheric matter density, which is density 3, matter density. And they look like dragon moths. They look like big ugly moths that have reptilian type form. That is the Omicron matrix. Now they are a collective of consciousness, just like all of us are up in the higher dimensional fields. But when they get into matter form, coming down in density, etheric, down into semi-etheric, down into physical, that would be the form they would appear as. They're the Draconians. Then you have the reptilians, which are different. They're called the Odedicron, and they're winged reptile avian. It's a kind of bird with leathery wings kind of being, reptile-type being. And there's several strains of hybrids, including ones that were part human through raids that were done for our races. So you had this three-way fight just brewing and waiting, literally, since 22,326 BC to pop up into our hologram. If things were left alone, we would be walking into a nightmare, a thought-form field that we would get trapped in. Trapped means the natural templates that connect this planet to its galaxy, to its universe, to its time matrix, to the sound matrix, to source, where something gets shattered in there, and the natural connection can't be made, which means the natural spirals of energy that come down into manifestation, then go back up out of manifestation, gets cut off at a certain point. Beings that end up on a planet or a time matrix that get what's called cut off the grids progressively begin. They're literally the templates that they have that they're manifesting on reverse polarity, and they begin a de-evolution cycle where they begin to progressively drop in frequency of consciousness because they can't pull any higher frequency in. A planet that goes into that condition is called a phantom planet, and a time matrix that goes into that condition is a phantom time matrix. There are several within Source phantom time matrices. The timelines, or the time cycles of time matrices, are all interconnected, and they pass through each other every once in a while during stellar activation cycles. When we go through this stellar activation cycle, and in the particle conversion period, the 3-day period, there will be one version of Earth's matter body and the people and things on it that go into that timeline, and they end up in a different time matrix than one of the phantom time matrices. Becomes phantom Earth, which means they lose the templates for the strand 4 and up in their genetic code, which means the three-dimensional consciousness is stuck down here. And it will de-evolve back into lesser and lesser developed human forms, then back into animal forms, back into some types of plant forms, mineral forms, until it's space dust again. It will lose its memory matrix. That's not a good thing compared to the joy that can be known and the ecstatic joy of at one minute with Source when you're conscious of having that. Because intervention has been given, the Armageddon scenario will be seen in the phantom matrix particle base, and it will be seen by the consciousness of the people whose bodies and consciousness have the angular rotation of particle spin characteristic to that particular rotation. People that are somewhere in between, it will depend on how close to which timeline your frequency is, because you'll be pulled by one or the other. It'll either take you up or down. The next stage up is called the bridge zone. The bridge zone is a timeline that a part of Earth's particle base will move into. That it's actually, this is the intervention. It wouldn't normally quite do, like if the physics were just going the regular way, it wouldn't quite do this. But if it wasn't done, the whole planet was going to go into the phantom matrix. So basically, there are certain frequency things, implants, put into the planetary grids that would allow certain levels of it to hold more frequency. The crystal pylon temples serve this purpose. They will allow more frequency to hold in Earth's body because inner Earth is directly connected to Earth. There are locations on Earth called Q zones or Q sites that directly connect to the crystal pylon temples of inner Earth. There is going to be a shift, 45-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin of a particular level of the planetary matter base and the people who resonate to that level of frequency that will progressively go into an event horizon or a projected future where they begin to have contact, first telepathic, then eventually it will be taken into, oh my God, they're really physical, yeah, the inner Earth people. And eventually they will realize at the time there are portals that link physical locations that you can literally walk through, shift angular rotation of particle spin, and pop up there. Inner Earth is physically solid, just like it is here. It's beautiful. It doesn't have the level of conflict because it's a system that's an antagonist. What we're going to do is the material is going to be eventually, at some point in the next couple weeks, fully given as a supplement to the Templar book, the Templar course book. For the people who didn't buy it, you'll get it, the supplement part of it, as a natural part of the workshop program. So you'll get the chart pack for the program after the program, but you'll have it for reference. So you will have the written material coming. I don't like it when it works this way because it really plays on my Virgo imprint that likes to have everything done a week before time and have bills paid a month before time and that kind of thing. I'm learning to let go of those attachments and not get upset or stressed out about it. So I hope you can share with that letting go with me. If I've offended anyone by being, as late as I am, I'm almost a half hour late, I do apologize. It has happened before in the New York City workshops every once in a while when I'll be working literally through the night. I do my best to bring you the most accurate information with the clearest detail in the most useful way that I possibly can. And I am human, and there are limitations to what time does here. So I will apologize again for that, and after that we'll just move on to what we're going to do today. Today's going to be a very interesting experience because in order to bring this material to you in a sequenced form without the standard chart pad that I put together beforehand that sequences the material, I have to work off of several sources for reference, and most of it will come through directly. I will share with you directly. Now, there's going to be a series of graphs used. These graphs are found, some of them are found in the Cathara manual, and some of them are found in the Templar manual. So the people who have either of those manuals, you do already have copies of these graphs. They just have different pages on them than they do right now, and the sequence is different. The graphs help a lot because I can tell you a story and show you what I mean in visual relationship to the concepts that I'm trying to present. So we'll be working part of the time off the graphs, part of the time I will share with you little bits of some of the pieces of the information that have come through, and then the rest of the time we're going to go through the itinerary that we got yesterday, and I'm going to talk about the different aspects of manifestation. Then we're going to get into, we'll have a short break between beginning and lunchtime. I usually do you'll have lunch and dinner, and there's a break in between each block. It won't be a long break. It'll only be 10 or 15 minutes, so we can keep rolling. But by later this afternoon, as we move toward the evening, we will be getting into direct technique. That's where I was told that over the lunch break, I'm going to be given the technique of using the master code symbols for embedding. Now, I said, couldn't I at least have that on paper now, like when I got home last night? And they said, no, it will be given over lunch, and I was very fortunate. For my birthday, which was today, Michael bought me a laptop. So I finally have the ability to at least put it on paper. So during lunch, while you guys are having your lunch, I will be getting the technique down that we're going to be using this afternoon. There's going to be more advanced techniques given tomorrow that I'm told I will be given tomorrow. For the guardians to hold the information this tightly means two things to me, just from experience in dealing with them. One, it has potential for probably not for people like us who wouldn't know how to use it wrong because we're just learning how to use it right, but for people who already know mechanics of certain things and we're looking for key elements that they didn't understand in order to misuse them. So it's high-level information that has a lot more potential than will just meet the eye the first time we hear it. And secondly, it means to me that something's up, that they would be taking this tight of a security rein on the data to begin with. I felt that something was up in the planetary biofields for the last several weeks. There's been a really strange tension that I felt in the planetary grids. I wouldn't call it a negative, I would call it a tension feeling. And it had a sound to it, which was a very deep kind of rumble that would happen every once in a while. There's an inner sound, not a sound that you hear with the outside ears. When I get sensations like that from the planetary grids, that's my biofield telling me that the planet's biofield is reacting to something. I do believe that the information that I will be given, probably in increments tomorrow, has to do with some of the things that are occurring to cause this problem. I do have a feeling it has to do with experiments that are being done with sonic waveforms in the Atlantic Ocean. And what this means in relation to work that we have been doing, the Guardian races have been doing over the last year as far as trying to balance the stargates as they open. Today we're going to have kind of a crash course in understanding stargates. As we understand the thought and manifestation, we're also going to get the basic structure of what we're dealing with here in the morning and probably early afternoon session, if I don't get it done by the end of the morning. We will get into a bit about what the stargates are, what is the time matrix, what we're in. Now, some people know this already, and I'm not trying to bore you guys to death who have been, to numerous workshops, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded, and every time something a little different comes out and adds more detail. And for the people who have not had exposure to this information, they might have it in the books, but it helps a lot to have the information to fill it out when somebody talks about it. So we'll go through quickly the basic structure of a manifestation template, where thought, and the original thought, source's thought, set the whole thing in motion. And then we'll bring it down into the structure of templates, the substance they're made of, and the structure that that substance takes on its way into what we perceive as the manifest illusion. One of the interesting things that I was given, and at least I got that much on paper, I don't have it reprinted yet, I just got one copy of it, but there was a chart given that explained a missing piece, like the missing link in what we call the transduction sequence, which was the sequence by which thought form goes into primal units of consciousness, goes through several stages that we did have. It goes from what are called Partakai units that I'll talk about, Partakai units to Kelon codes, to scalar waves, to scalar wave grids. And then there was a jump in the data that then it ends up as manifest. And there was not a link. I knew there was something that linked those two things together. The templates that are made of small waveforms that you can't see, that are not manifest in the way we consider manifestation, and the things we call manifest. The information was given on things, what do they call them? Ionic particulates, which are that transition point that happens between a scalar wave template and what are called fire letters that we'll talk about, and the atomic structure. So there were some interesting things. They were listing particles that I've never even heard of because I'm not a physicist. So there's at least a list that shows us, it fills in the blank. So we begin to understand what not only everything is manifested of, what our bodies are manifested of, what the planet is manifested of, what the hologram is manifested of. We begin to understand it's these units that we generate every time we think a thought. When we create, we are literally creating energy forms directly. There is a name to those forms, and we are creating them in specific ways. When they don't work the way we want them to, that means something's wrong with the organic process. So as we begin to understand some of the things about what thoughts are made of, we will begin to be empowered to have more control over what types of thoughts we try to manifest and our success in getting them to be manifest. So we will start with a beginning, I think, on, I want to see if I go that direction or this direction. There's two directions I could go, and I think I will go into structure second. All right, the first thing that I would like to talk about, excuse me, is manifestation templates and template substance. Now, anybody that's taken the Kathara Healing Program or that has read any of the Templar Manual will have already heard the terms Partakai, Partake, and Partakam. Those are the three primary units of energy that all other energy forces and units are built out of. They are units of consciousness. They come from source consciousness. They are the first manifestations before manifestation as we know it, that source creates within itself to set the template and the platform in which manifestation can take place. Partakai, Partake, and Partakam are interesting because they're already being theorized by certain they're considered fringe physicists. They supposedly have discovered the evidence of Partakam units. They were interested in this work when I first started to bring it out, because I'd never heard these words before, except in the ancient days. And all of a sudden, these guys said, "We know Partakam." Wow, we had the same word. Who they've been talking to, you know? But they didn't know the existence of the other two parts, and they all go together. Partakai, Partake, and Partakam are actually phases of the same unit of consciousness. Partakai, it starts as Partakai, which would represent the whole. That is the template, the core foundation units that form the templates for what's called antimatter, A-N-T-E, matter. That is, when it comes into substance, it's a substance that is composed of both electrical and magnetic charge, or polarity, but they're unified, so it's actually a tri-charge, or a three-charged potentiality. I call it a potentiality because it's not in particle form yet. Now, the units of Partakai, Partake, and Partakam, the easiest way to understand what they are and where they come from is to understand them as the units of the consciousness of God. It is the closest definition that you can get to understanding where does energy come from in the first place. Our scientists theorize about big bangs and all sorts of interesting theories about how life was created and about how matter might be created. But they have no more proof for their theories than any of the other things. The religions have their versions, the scientists have their versions, and they argue with each other and don't agree with each other. The Partakai, Partake, and Partakam are the place where spirit and science meet, the place where consciousness, which is spirit, that eternal life force, that intelligent, sentient life force that always has been and always will be, where that meets interaction with itself that utilizes specific mathematical formula, or what would translate into mathematical formula when we're in density, through those mathematical relationships of consciousness to itself. The platform for holographic projection of consciousness is set, and through that, everything that is in what are called the manifest worlds comes perpetually into being. One of the things that's interesting about creation is that creation didn't start once and then was over. It is perpetual and ongoing. There is only one true moment in existence, and that is now. Now, we perceive one moment following another. That is an illusion of the hologram that's created by our body templates in their reaction to the unified field of consciousness around them. In the reality of the nature of the game, as I like to call it, it is all happening now Every time vector, every time cycle is a part of the now. Time would therefore be more like space, where you could go from this time and move over to that time. The point of creation and the point of discreation are all the same point. They are all now, and everything in between those 2 points is now. There is not a point where it began and it will stop. It is perpetual. If we can understand that, it helps us to get a broader view of when I talk about the creation point, when I talk about how Source chose to move its consciousness in certain ways in order to form the Partakai units, the first Partakai unit, and from that it formed other things, and from that it formed the holographic template. If you can realize that this isn't a place in the ancient distant past that's so far away that it's not worth remembering, it's something that is alive right now, happening right now, and it's happening every moment within your bodies and within your consciousness, within the planetary body, and within all manifest forms. What is really interesting is when you get to a level of DNA activation while you're still in density, where you can begin to see multi-time vectors. Now, right now, we're in what's called single vector consciousness, which means our DNA is working in a way where we see a single time vector moving forward rather than several. As your DNA activates from 3 strands, which we actually have activated right now, up to 6, you become a multi-vector consciousness. And you can begin to see what's really happening with manifestation down here in density 1. Things flash off and on, literally, so quickly, some parts of them so quickly and some parts of them so slowly that we can't see it with the senses, because the senses that come out of our templates have a certain mathematical calibration that gives them a range of vibration that they can perceive and a large range that's blocked out. That's how the hologram is created. If we had all of our sense receptors turned on, we would not see the hologram. Everything would be direct cognition, known as a part of us within ourselves, as we know ourselves as Source. So the hologram is created by creating negative and positive space. The positive space would represent the object, and the negative space would be the area around it, the space between objects, be it between you and the person next to you, or between this planet and the other planets. Space between objects is the vibrational frequency. It's the vibrational frequencies that our body systems are not geared to perceiving, so they block it out. When we look up at the stars and into outer space, we are actually seeing a massive reality field that's filled with life and consciousness and all sorts of structures and forms and density levels and civilizations. Ours is quite small compared to some of the many that are there. But we look up into space, and our scientists can send instruments made of 3-dimensional matter up into space to explore what's there, and they will see things they call stars, which are balls of flaming gases that have a core. Those balls of flaming gases, first of all, the flaming gases represent D4 and higher frequency. When you get to full 4th strand activation and you can hold that, you would be able to sit on the sun without getting burned. It is a holographic projection, and when we look at deep space, the darkness of deep space, the huge amounts of distances, we are looking at several things. The objects we are seeing, as the stars, are actually part of the past. Even science knows that, with the speeds that light travels. And the darkness we are seeing are the parts of the reality fields that are blocked out because we don't have the same frequency receptors. The receptors are called aparthi in our templates. So we literally don't see them. Because we are the manufacturers of our hologram. The hologram manufactures itself through our DNA templates, through our body templates. If our body templates do not hold a certain frequency, that thing, whatever it is, will not be manifest in our experience, period. There's no way to see something in your experience if you, A, don't have the receivers of that frequency in your template organically, and B, don't have them turned on. If those frequency receivers are not doing their job to receive frequency, the frequency will be blocked out as if it doesn't exist. So you will not see the reality fields that are formed from those types of frequencies. As we move into the time period we're in right now, stellar activation cycle, exciting things happen because in the stellar activation cycle, whether we're ready or not, whether the plants, the animals, the minerals are ready or not, frequency comes into Earth's template. We're all a part of Earth's template because we live on the planet, which means frequency is going to come from the Earth's template into us. It is going to trigger activation of things that have been sleeping and dormant for thousands and thousands of years in the human race. It's going to trigger activation of aparthi, sense receivers that can pick up higher frequency, which means progressively, and it doesn't all happen at once, but progressively, your consciousness brings in more of itself from the higher dimensional fields, which brings with it the hologram of those higher dimensional fields. As you fully anchor, say, your soul matrix, which is the part of your consciousness that's stationed in density 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, you will, to get that part of you in your body fully focused here, have to activate strands 4, 5, and 6 in the DNA template, which will create certain changes in the chemical DNA composition that will expand the body and the atomic structure enough so that you can hold those frequencies and that it won't fry you from the inside. Because if you try to put 6-dimensional frequency into a 3-dimensional body, you blow the body up. We're going through a shift in hologram because we're going through a shift in consciousness where we're shifting our lower consciousness from down here into merger with our higher consciousness. And the degree to which we are successful in doing that will be the degree to which our hologram reflects the expansion of seeing and being a part of the higher dimensional fields. Integration of the higher dimensional fields starts subtly, and you're all doing it. Even the people that don't want to hear this stuff are doing it. So it's kind of funny. You know, and God bless the poor people that have been following dogmas that tell them knowing any of this isn't their business and it's evil to know this. They're still doing it anyway. But it's happening to them rather than them working with it to co-create a pleasant experience. We are all beginning, and we have been beginning. Our consciousness right now has changed since what it was like 2,000 years ago. We accrete. This is how we grow through time. Accrete means to bring frequency into ourselves, which activates more of our template, which expands our form and our consciousness. We've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years on this planet. In the early times, when certain things happened to the DNA, the quality we call dreaming now did not happen. Humans at certain points, because they suffered a DNA mutation, did not dream. They were not able to create visualizations where we can close our eyes and imagine something. They were locked in to full 3-dimensional focus. Right now, we don't realize it usually without really thinking about it. But our bodies may be in a 3-dimensional framework, but our minds already are beyond it. We have dreams, every once in a while at least. At least when you were a kid you had them. Everybody dreams at this point. Even science knows that. They can tell when you go into REM with the rapid eye movement that you're in a dream state, where you go into like theta brainwave patterns if you go into deep sleep. Dreaming is the first beginning point of activating strand 4, where you can start to bring in the information that's stored in dimension 4, in the part of your identity that resides in dimension 4. You're linking consciousness with the first part of your soul matrix through dreaming. Now, when you go get a book on dreaming by the experts, I don't know what's wrong with this thing, but it's doing some really strange things. When you get the dream books, you know how the experts like to analyze your dreams? Particularly the ones coming from the psychological perspective. They don't believe in the soul. They're just going to analyze the mind as a chemical reality that happens to produce consciousness. They'll tell you all sorts of things about what your dreams mean. And this symbol means that, and you see this, and it means that to the inner psyche. Or you have a dream about this, and it means you have this hang-up, or that ism, or that problem. I would just, if you have those kind of dream books, pass them on to one of the sleepers that don't want to know about souls. Let them start there. At least they're acknowledging dreams. But those kind of dream interpretation books tell you very, very little. They tell you somebody else's opinion, and they show you their limitations of perception. But they're not going to help you a lot. You have what it takes to begin to understand the language of your dreams. The language of your dreams is the language of your higher self. Your higher self starting with your D4 consciousness, which is your astral level of consciousness. Some people already are getting very good at being able to pull their astral body out of their physical body at will and move it elsewhere in space-time down here. That would be an advancement from dreaming. There's a progression that you will have inside of your consciousness before you get to a point where you're going to be able to physically see a stargate, for instance, and say, I'm going to shift my angular rotational particle spin so I can go through that. There are certain things that are going to happen way before you get that level of mastery of your physical form. The first thing will be dreaming. Now, most people dream, so that's a good thing, because you can look back and say, oh, I'm already part of the way through this process. This is good. I'm not starting at the beginning. I'm already in it. Because you are, if you have any dreams or any recollection of any dreams from even childhood. Dreams have a progression. Dreams are not just, there's certain scientific interpretations that tell us dreams are the brain's way of kicking out certain types of chaotic patterns, your process issues and things, and kind of kicking out the sludge from your daily life and just clearing the consciousness on that level. There is a level of what's called unconscious chaos that has to do with clearing out portions of fragmented thought forms that you're carrying around with you. What science doesn't realize is those portions of chaotic thought forms are not just yours in this body. They're also portions of what's your incarnational imprint. There will be a point in dreaming where you'll become aware of dreaming, and sometimes it'll seem very, very chaotic, like, what was that? You know, you can dream some of the strangest things, horses standing on top of the Empire State Building, and you know it's important. And you come back and you wake up and you know it was important. You feel it. And in the dream you understood why. But by the time you get back out on this side, you just know it was important, and you have an image of a horse on top of the Empire State Building, and you can't figure out for the life of you what you're trying to tell yourself. You will get these type of dream experiences when your consciousness is learning to raise in frequency enough to disassociate a little bit from the strands 1, 2, and 3 in the DNA template and move itself up into the early strands of the 4th dimensional frequency bands, which is considered the astral plane. After that, there is another level of dreaming where you start to get coherent dreaming, where things start to make more sense, and you get that sense of, aha, I understand this, that still is aha there more in the dream state than when you wake up and try to remember what the aha was. But there's more clarity to the dreams. They might be less often. In the first stage of integrating your higher self, you might get a whole string of chaos dreams, silly dreams, weird, wacky dreams, sometimes scary dreams, nightmare dreams when you're processing fear patterns. They may come in rapid succession, because it's like when you start to move through the chaotic patterns, you tend to move through a bunch of them. Like start here and just clear the whole block of them. So you might go through a cycle of really weird dreamings or nightmares, those kind of things. And then you'll find it stops. And all of a sudden you might think, you don't even dream anymore. What happened to me? Then you'll go into a phase after that of more conscious dreaming, where you start to have dreams and start to remember that you're having dreams when you wake up. And they seem to have more coherence to them. Some of them may seem to be as if you were somebody else, living in another time or place, in another body, having another drama. When you start to move into that next space, you're picking up on information that has to do with your other density 1 incarnations of self that are happening simultaneously here and now. In the dream state, you'll get the beginnings of images, almost like Kodak moments, that are coming through from your other space-time selves. You're learning to open information on the 4th dimensional level that comes into your 4th DNA strand template, makes a link to your 3rd DNA strand template, where your mental body focus is, and you start to be able to remember some of the data. Those are only the beginnings of the process of integrating your higher consciousness. When you get through to the point where you're having sequential dreams, where you're actually able to see a dream from pretty much start to the end, and it seems to have told you a story that makes some sense, and you can remember it when you woke up. That's telling you something. That's telling you you've anchored a whole frequency pattern from D4, which means you've opened the aparthy in your DNA strand templates corresponding to those frequencies in D4 and linked them to the aparthy in your strand 3 template. So you've made a conduit, a live conduit of consciousness. That's how you remember dreams. If you don't remember dreams yet, it simply means you haven't opened any of the 4th strand aparthy. And it will come because the frequencies on the planet right now will demand it. They are going to trigger fourth strand activation in people, whether or not they're ready to do it. So people will start dreaming, and they'll start doing a lot more than that too. When you get to a certain level of dreaming, where you're synthesizing frequency and being able to download it down into your consciousness here, you'll go from sequential dreaming to simultaneous dreaming, where you will not only be aware of yourself in a dream, it will become a lucid dream, where it's like hyper-awareness. It feels more real than it does here, because it's more intense. The higher you go up in frequency, the more intense and immediate the experience feels. You'll have lucid dreaming that goes into simultaneous lucid dreaming, where you will find yourself in several dramas, knowing you're there all at the same time, as if you're watching 4 movies at once. It'll start with maybe 2, and then it will expand. Then you start to learn you can move your consciousness from one to the other by expanding and contracting your consciousness. Expanding and contracting your consciousness